This episode of How To Wrestling was requested by John, one of our lovely backers over at patreon.com/How To Wrestling. Hey, if you enjoy the show and you enjoy it being ad-free and fan-supported, why not consider heading over to our Patreon page, becoming a lovely $5 backer, and getting access to a whole load of extra content. Since 2015 or thereabouts, Joe and I have been reviewing every single WWE and now AEW pay-per-view. All of those reviews, there's over 100 now, are available if you become a backer. As well as that, get access to our whole raft of side series and extra ventures, including random bonus content. But besides that, you've got the likes of How To Revisited, where we go back and check out how the story has changed since we recorded episodes on certain wrestlers, and our new favorite series, It's Pay-Per-View Classique. You can go and listen to Joe and I go in-depth big pay-per-view reviews on the likes of WrestleMania 17, In Your House, Good Friends, Better Enemies, most recently King of the Ring 94, where Joe and I finally found out how much this guy weighs. All this and more available on our Patreon page, but for now, settle in and enjoy a glass of red wine perhaps with big sexy Daddy Cool himself. It's time for How To Kevin Nash. Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of How To Wrestling, the world's first podcast detailing how to wrestling, how to get into wrestling, how to understand wrestling, and goodness knows maybe even how to enjoy wrestling. And oh boy, time to get in the big rig today. It's time for us to chat about one of the coolest cats in the history of professional wrestling. Today's episode is all about big, sexy Kevin Nash, aka Diesel. It's me, your old pal Kevin, joined as I am always with the ever-inquisitive Joe Graham.
Hello.
How you doing today, Joe?
I'm quite well, thank you. How are you?
Really excited, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah. It's like one of the most interesting characters in wrestling, and I don't mean like as in a character that is portrayed, as in this guy is a character in real life.
Yeah.
And I think me and a lot of listeners really, really, really want to see what you make of Kevin Nash. Some would stoop to call him a piece of work. Other people will say that he's one of the greatest minds and most cerebral fellows ever in wrestling. Who is this man? What do you know about Kevin Nash before we settled into our research for this episode?
I didn't know much about Kevin Nash, especially until I feel I first came across Kevin Nash really when we watched Magic Mike.
Sorry, that's me when you most took notice of him, I'm thinking.
Well, I don't know when else I really would have come across him.
I mean, the Scott Hall episode, I'm sure he popped up there.
Yeah, he was there, but then so were all the other ones, like Shawn Michaels and Triple H and X-Pac and all them.
So you just kind of knew him as a clique guy, basically, part of this group of wrestlers that kind of ran things a little bit in the WWF in the 90s.
I knew him as the big click guy.
Big click guy.
The biggest one.
Is that because there's big clicks every time he stands up, or big click guy?
No, I mean, he was in the clique, and he's a very large man. He's like nearly 7 foot tall.
And what was it about? What was it about seeing him in Magic Mike that then kind of put him at the forefront of your mind? What was it about? Was it the performance? Was it just who he was as a person? What was it?
Well, it was interesting watching it with you, because you basically revealed, you were like, oh, he's playing himself. Because in Magic Mike, he plays a stripper, and it's great because he doesn't really try. He's just he literally just takes his clothes off and kind of thrusts his hips a little bit.
Right.
But there's no effort going. You normally, when you think of especially male strippers, you think of a lot of work and effort and energy that goes into a routine.
Yeah, right.
And,
I mean, not to draw too many parallels to the world of wrestling, but to dance as well. I mean, there's a lot more work that goes into it than the lay folk might think, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like professional wrestling is more about understating stuff, downplaying things that have happened. Whereas dancing is the other way around. You've got to over-exaggerate.
Okay.
Anyway, it was just funny seeing him just kind of lazily strip.
So it was you seeing me react to the kind of similarities almost between that character and the real life persona, or at least as I had kind of ascertained as being Kevin Nash.
I had heard, one of the only things I had heard about big sexy daddy cool Kevin Nash Diesel. Have I got all his names?
I think you got most of them there, yeah.
It's the only thing I knew about him was that he was kind of lazy. Like he doesn't really work hard.
Okay. And like, here's a question. Like, and it extends to both the world of high-end stripping and also for wrestling. If you're lazy and, as you say, you're not even really trying, and by the way, I'm not damning Kevin Nash with this verdict. This is just kind of the first impressions that Joe had. But if you are kind of lower energy or not trying as much and all that, surely that means you're going to do, less business. You're not going to be as popular, and people aren't going to be drawn to you. What is there an overcompensation in other aspects then?
I mean, he's very big.
Very big?
Very sexy.
Is it what makes him? Is it just that, I mean, there's lots of big people in wrestling. I'd say there's lots of sexy people in wrestling.
Yeah.
Has he got anything else going for him in that sense?
He's very charismatic.
Right.
He's a cool character.
Cool.
Yeah, Big Daddy Cool. He's called that for a reason. Like he's very chill.
All right, because I was going to kind of maybe try and tease that apart a little bit, because I don't know if we've talked very often about wrestlers who we think are really cool on this podcast. Very often, I don't think that kind of comes through.
No, I'm trying to think of a single wrestler we've covered who we were like, yeah, they're cool.
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of modern people who are like, okay, they're cool. I'm sure there's some.
Are there?
There's got to be at least one cool wrestler.
Well, I'm not sure.
Manami Toyota's cool, right?
Yeah.
But Kevin Nash's coolness, I mean, very rarely someone who actually includes the word cool in their moniker would actually be considered cool. But I would argue that he's a very cool customer indeed. What does it mean to be cool if you're Kevin Nash?
How do you mean?
As in, like, does he give off that air, and what does it actually, like, translate? Do you, like, view him as a cool individual?
It's hard to say because, like, obviously, as I said, I hadn't really seen anything of him. I mean, he's very cool in Magic Mike. He plays, as you said, like himself.
Yeah.
And he's just like very laid back in it and very charismatic and kind of like quite funny. People like get on with him.
Right, yeah.
And he's just like quite a magnetic person, it seems. And it wasn't until like we started watching a few shoot interviews. And I saw a bit of that shining through. Now, not a lot, because I feel like Kevin Nash's shoot interviews are very diverse on the spectrum of cool and not cool.
I was going to say, like, because we went from kind of, seeing that movie to, like, kind of deciding, right, that's going to be the next episode. We started kind of, getting in some of the tweets and doing some of the kind of extra watching and all that. But we were really onto that shoot interview train quite early on.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever seen you change your mind on someone and then change it back, and then kind of arrive at this kind of almost no man's land of, I feel that you think that he's both one of the coolest people in wrestling and also one of the lamest people in wrestling, depending on what clip I've shown you at what given time.
I don't think he's like lame, like uncool or whatever. Like he is definitely like universally considered cool.
Okay.
I think that is just a fact of him. He is very cool. I think because he just doesn't seem to take things seriously, and because he, probably partly due to his size, but not entirely down to that, it's like he takes his time talking and moving. He's very deliberate.
He's not a shouter like Jake Roberts, isn't he?
Not a shouter, yeah. He's just like laid back, cool guy. He just seems like the type of person that you would, if you met him somewhere, you'd probably have a good chat for, 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
An interesting person.
Kevin Nash feels like the ideal person to be on a plane with, or on one of those nice lounges if you're waiting for a ferry or something like that. You chat with Kevin Nash for 10 minutes, you have a good time.
I wouldn't want to be next to him on a plane because inevitably he would be in the aisle seat and I would need to pee, and then I'd have to like ask him to get up every 10 minutes.
Oh yeah, and also as well, I don't want to be on a plane with someone who's like taller than me. I'm already going to be taking up a lot of space.
Yeah, God, you'd have no leg room.
No, absolutely not. So, trying to get to grips with Kevin Nash and trying to guide Joe down the winding path of his various chats, opinions, countless appearances in many, many different guises across many different companies proved to be a little bit more challenging than I thought. Because I did know that there was a documentary that WWE had produced about him, which was called Kevin Nash Too Sweet, the inside story of the Click or whatever it was. And my God, I was beyond shocked that WWE managed to produce a documentary so plain and pedestrian and normal about someone who I really think is pretty damn unique in wrestling in terms of both mindset and their career and all that. I didn't have a very good time watching this documentary.
Not only was it very plain, but also very confusing. They kept jumping around.
Yeah.
When I took my notes, because I always take notes for these documentary bits, and the way it was jumping around, I was very confused as to like when in his career he like met Scott Hall.
Right, yeah.
It kind of made out as though he met Scott before he met Sean, and then like he did Oz before, like after the Click, and it was just like the jumping around.
They're all
of
jumbled,
everything, and like they didn't seem like it was all just about him. Really, it was kind of like mostly about his friendship with Scott and like Scott's demons and stuff. And it's like, okay, I already know about all that.
Yeah,
though.
right.
We all talk about Scott Hall's personal demons a lot.
So kind of almost like we'll be using this still as kind of like, in some respects, like a bit of a fishbone, but we'll be taking out a lot of the bones and moving them around the skeleton and hopefully trying to make sense of it, because I feel there is a lot more to this man's career. Not just a case of like, oh, that it's all very controversial and all that. I just feel like that, I don't know, maybe they didn't want you to see this other side of big sexy Kevin Nash.
Maybe, and maybe it's also the fact that, like, you know, members of the Clique, as far as they go, he's like the least interesting, and I'm doing that in inverted commas.
He's doing those right into the mic there.
Because, like, obviously Shawn Michaels, he's Shawn Michaels.
Yeah.
He's the star of the Clique. And then you've got Triple H, you know, he's like the next owner of the WWE potentially at this point. And, well, we'll see. And then you've got Scott Hall, who's obviously like super hunk, but with like terrible drug addiction problems and like, you know, criminal history and things. You know, and of course, like X-Pac as well, like the small boy who...
The
again,
Richard Hammond of the group. Like.
Lots and lots of drug problems and, you know, issues of his own in his personal life. So I feel like just through association, Kevin Nash is like the least controversial out of those people.
Yeah, I get that. Like the kind of the seeming lack of controversy kind of as it relates to personal problems and all that.
And I think especially when like the main thing people have to say about him is like, oh, he's kind of lazy. And it's like, well, why would we talk about this lazy guy when we could talk about Scott Hall's demons?
And did that shock you kind of as we were going through the documentary? Like you knew that he was associated a lot with Scott and a lot of people who, you know, through episodes and other appearances and whatnot, you know that there's a lot of kind of drug use, and I'm pretty sure when I've talked about, you know, the casual rampant drug use in wrestling in the early 90s, I've thrown his name in there as well.
Yeah.
Did it surprise you that he was not someone who was beleaguered with a lot of like personal demons, to use that WWE term?
I mean, I guess so, just because the other members of the Clique have suffered so badly. Like they've come out the other side, and you know, Triple H obviously he's always been sober, so he wasn't affected by it. But like literally every single other member, you know, Shawn Michaels, X-Pac, and Scott Hall, they have all come out the other side like just permanently damaged.
Yeah. Like
there's irreparable harm that's been done to them personally and professionally through their exceptional drug use.
Yeah,
like just the amount is obscene. So it surprised me a bit because I knew that Kevin Nash was just as much of a partier as the rest of them. So I thought, well, you know, maybe he would be as hard done by. But it doesn't surprise me in that, you know, I know that drugs and alcohol and addiction affect people very differently.
Yeah, I've kind of, you know, for over on the Attitude Era podcast, Adam has been doing the William Regal autobiography. And obviously we did an episode of William Regal here, but kind of hearing firsthand kind of an addict's account of addiction and their understanding of it, it kind of has almost changed my perception on it. Like the idea that like, here's a fixed quantity of like narcotics and this will fuck everyone up or change their life irreparably in the same way. And it's absolutely not the case. Like, you know, tolerance and attitudes and all that. And like Nash, something that always struck me, and I will say right now, I'm a recovering Kevin Nash shoot interview addict. I used to spend countless hours, thousands of hours, it feels like, watching this guy talk shit for varying paydays and varying amounts of ravioli. But one thing he always said, one thing he said that stood with me a long, long time, and I'll be lying if I said it didn't like strike me. Like I heard this when I was in my very early 20s, and someone asked him kind of about like, you know, drug use or whatever, and they were asking about like, you know, cocaine and stuff like that, and he goes, well, you know, my dad was a tall guy, died of a heart attack when he was 45 years old. I was 8. you don't see too many 70-year-old giants walking around, so I've always had to look after myself. And I was like, oh shit, I'm not a giant, I'm tall, but like, just him very plainly saying kind of, I'm a big tall guy. I am aware that I'm predisposed to probably having more heart issues than the average guy.
But
so he's always kind of, even though he did a lot of like, you know, of muscle relaxants and he smoked a lot of pot and drank a lot of beer.
I mean, I don't know about pot, but like alcohol and muscle relaxants, neither of them are good for your organs. And I don't think they're good for your heart either. So like, what's the deal there?
I think it's like literally that he wouldn't do things like cocaine and speed and stimulants or like the big, you know, doses of oxy. Like this guy wouldn't be going on, you know, these GHB blackouts and stuff like that.
Right, whereas the others would?
Yes, and I think what it was that Nash was a lot more of a conscientious partaker, let's just say. So even though his drug use would probably be outstanding compared to others, or you probably would be shocked to hear it, he was always very conscious. And I think, like, I can't imagine what it's like if you're 8 years old and your dad dies, you know, how early on that must affect you and kind of... He seems to have a little bit of that bon vivant attitude towards life, like squeeze every drop out of it. And you can't help but think that kind of influences a little bit. Were you surprised to know about kind of his background, his sports background and whatnot?
I was. So he apparently played basketball in school.
Yeah, he got himself onto a college basketball team, the Tennessee 49ers.
Which, like... You were like, why are you surprised? He's really tall. Of course he plays basketball. And the reason I'm surprised is because, as Kevin recently learned, I used to play basketball.
Oh yeah, you did.
We went to Blackpool Pleasure Beach for my birthday.
Oh God, I was waiting for this. Yes, I'm so proud. I want to show off my amazing girlfriend who's the fucking basketball queen of Blackpool.
We were literally, we had been told like the day before by our friends that like, oh, and they use these like oval hoops and stuff, so it's like impossible to score properly on those basketball things. And you were like, well, let's just give it a go. And I was like, fine, I'll give it a go. And I scored like, I don't know how many hoops in 30 seconds, but a lot. And I was very happy.
Infinite baskets, pretty much.
So the reason I say that is because in basketball, you have to have a lot of energy. You have to try really hard. It requires a huge amount of effort. Like, you can't phone it in. There are lots of sports where you can. Like, especially team-based sports, depending on your position.
It's worth me pointing out as well, Jo found out this about Nash after she had watched several of his wrestling matches. So that might have, like...
But, like, I am surprised because, like, it's a huge amount of work and it requires a huge amount of training as well.
And not a lot of money as well.
No,
you know?
It's so competitive.
Particularly at the level that he was at,
Yeah, so just to me, it seemed like out of line with his values. Like, he'd have to try to... The thing I had heard about Kevin Nash was that he believed in working smart, not hard. And basketball is about working hard, not smart.
Yeah,
so
right.
I don't understand why you would go in that career when it's like you're literally competing with people who have to get up at 3 a.m. to just to throw hoops for 5 hours, and that's all they do.
Yeah, and I think like I would always assume, like not knowing much about his skill level or his, you know, not followed his basketball career very, very closely. But I would imagine, particularly in Tennessee as well, the fact that he was nearly 7 foot, like, you know, physical specimen. You know, I knew lads when in school. I went to a rugby school. There was a guy I knew, and he was 7 foot. And honestly, he couldn't have cared less about rugby. Just didn't really give two shits one way or the other.
Yeah.
Like, he was a really nice guy. He was really good. Got on with his teammates and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll go to practice and all that, but he's not going to be, you know, getting up at 5 a.m. to run laps and all this stuff. Anyway,
I feel like...
but he plays rugby for Ireland now.
But I feel like rugby is one of those sports where you can get away with like that a bit if you are a big guy, because so much of it is about your weight.
But everyone in basketball's tall, right?
But like, that's it. Like nearly everyone in basketball's tall, but everyone in basketball is trying really hard 100% of the time, because like of the rules of basketball, you have to like dribble and run at the same time to move across the court. Like, you're constantly jumping. It's just so much effort. I don't understand why he'd want to do it.
So he does end up going from his basketball scholarship in Tennessee, and this guy as well, by the way, university, you know, far from being just, you know, some kind of jock who showed up, he did his degree in like a psychology, I believe it was his minor, and he did like educational research and stuff like that as well. Like, genuinely, like, kind of, you know, an impressive resume in terms of his academics and all that. And he goes from university off to playing basketball in Germany. And this is like early 80s, like between kind of 1979 and 1981 is when he was active playing basketball.
So like what, would he have been like scouted or something, or just decided, I want to go live in Germany for a bit?
I think it would have been kind of a combination of both, like kind of making the decision to make a move there. And I would figure, and it's like you go to Germany to do that because he didn't reckon he was at the skill level or at the kind of notoriety to get drafted and become professional over there.
Right.
And, he's talked about it on interviews and stuff like that, like it was just kind of, I made a bit of money, it was all right, but I don't think it was his passion, and it certainly wasn't like something that was very, long term from. He did get like an injury as well to his knee early on. He tore his ACL, which kind of ended the career and all that. And it's kind of funny to think that you could like, be taken out of basketball and say, right, you can't jump, you can't like kind of, land on your 2 feet off a distance anymore. That's out of action for you. But like wrestling will be fine still.
No, that's so weird, isn't it? But
it
says a lot about like sports like basketball, how much work was required.
So it's worth kind of pointing out, like Nash kind of long before he was in wrestling, he already was working with a severely fucked up knee.
Yeah.
Like, and I think as well, something I've always been quite scared of again. And again, I know his name is Kevin and he's over 6'4", but like, I won't try and draw too many parallels with myself. But the idea of having anything wrong with my knee or like my foot or my leg is again like one of those things that's I think extra terrifying if you're on the taller side.
Yeah.
Because the world isn't built for people who are over a certain height. And if I feel that at the little height I am, I can't imagine what it's like if you're Kevin Nash.
Well, also, I think falling over is horrible for anyone, but it is way, way worse if you're tall because you're heavier and also you've got further to fall. So it's more dangerous the taller you are.
So Nash leaves the world of basketball and finds himself enlisted then in the army.
So how did that happen?
I have no genuine idea. I've heard him talk about this like it was basically a really easy summer job, it feels like, because in Germany after the war, they had loads of American army bases that were set up. They're still there to this day, a lot of them. I remember where I was when I went on my exchange, I was in Stuttgart. There was a big army base out there. I think Buffalo Soldiers, a movie with Joaquin Phoenix. It's kind of about, being stationed there in the 80s. And you have like a lot of kind of, guys who went through military training who are then just kind of, twiddling their thumbs.
Around in Germany, yeah.
Nothing to kill but time, as they say. And at Nash, I believe his job was that he was a guard. He was with military police and he worked on a radar station.
Wow.
Which I can't imagine there was too much action that he saw there.
That seems more on his level.
Yeah, and I think like after suffering an injury and ending your basketball career, that was very much the definition of putting his feet up.
Yeah,
I think.
Rest a bit. So I have a quick question about this then. Does that mean Kevin Nash speaks German?
He popped out a few words in a shoot I've watched, but I don't think he's got any sort of a fluency.
Oh, okay.
But I will say, like, this kind of all this comes together. I think sometimes people kind of think it's a front because I think in wrestling, when there's a lot of kind of like people who aren't very like world traveled or anything like that, and they were kind of like, they grew up wanting to be a wrestler, and then they got into wrestling training right out of school, and then became a wrestler.
Yeah.
And their world is kind of small.
Yeah.
Nash is probably a bit more world traveled when he got into wrestling. He'd been in professional sports, he'd been in the army, he'd been kind of around the block a little bit. So I do think he generally was a little bit more kind of worldly and more world traveled than a lot of his peers and all that. But I think, particularly in the clique, I think he kind of used that to his advantage. I think a lot of folks maybe thought that he was a lot smarter and a lot more world traveled than he actually was necessarily. And like the career trajectory ain't so hot when you go from being like college scholarship, okay, you're doing pro basketball in Germany, and now you've had an injury, now you're going to be in a military police, and now you've left the army, and now you're going to go and be a floor manager for a strip club in Atlanta.
How was he qualified to do that?
Big dudes, had seen a bit of action, former military guy.
That I could
military
understand.
police.
I
brother.
Understand that meaning you're qualified to be a bouncer. How does that make you qualified to be a floor manager?
I think if you're
a strip club, can you imagine how hard that is?
But I mean, I would. That is actually quite impressive because I always heard like, oh, he was just a big piece of muscle at a strip bar. But like, if you're actually the floor manager, that's a lot of work there.
I mean,
Silvio Dante will tell you. Like,
I was just gonna say, like, there's a lot of management involved there. It's a lot of politicking.
A lot of politics, management of people,
contract negotiations,
money. Networking, deal with contracts and all that.
Promotional activities, marketing. There's probably shit tons.
Again, we had another person on this podcast who had a similar background.
Yeah, DDP,
and we know that served him very, very well in the world of wrestling.
There's definitely big crossover between, like, not just stripping, I'd say, but any kind of like
management,
like anything on the cusp of like sex work and performance art. I think is very similar to wrestling, like in terms of artistically.
So literally, and this is like, it's so funny because I'm coming to all this kind of like, and then he was in Germany working as a military, all this like really kind of like, oh, not the typical wrestler story.
Yeah.
But let's get us to this point of the typical wrestler story where a couple of wrestlers wander into a strip club and go, look at the big man over there. He literally said like, apparently like they rang up the trainer. Like, yeah, we got one. Big lad here. Yes, please.
The idea of like the modern day equivalent being like William Regal going around to strip bars and like scouting talent.
Yeah, never mind your NCAA tournaments. You want to be heading down to the clubs. Like, I mean, in fairness, when's the last time, like, other than Damian Priest, we haven't had many bouncers make their way into the world of wrestling.
Yeah.
Like, used to be a pipeline. That was where most of our top stars came from, for Christ's sake.
That'll be NXT 2.0, I guarantee it.
So he gets into the world of wrestling. Did you remember what his first gimmick was called? He was in a tag team.
Oh, I can't remember. They had a really bad name. I just remember that he had a mohawk and it was really bad. He looked like he was in Predator.
I really, really actually am embarrassed. I can't remember if it's the Blaster Masters or the Master Blasters, but I think it's the Blaster Masters.
Yeah.
He was in the Blaster Masters. He was a Master Blaster in the Blaster Masters.
Okay.
But he was the master of blasting, basically.
Right.
Big, tall dude, put him in a tag team with someone who's a little bit more experienced. How would you describe the look? He's got a mohawk. What else has he got going from here, the Master Blasters?
They've leaned into the army stuff. He's got, like, army camo face paint stuff on him.
He just looks dirty, if I'm
He does
honest.
look kind of... He looks like a chimney sweep.
Like one of those lads who's going to show up and fuck up the house at the end of Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Or he's like been thrown to the ringside area in the ECW arena. He's got a little bit of dust on him. He kind of looks like a baddie from Fist of the North Star or like or Mad Max or something like that.
Yeah.
A little bit of that. I feel like it was a big important thing in wrestling in the 80s. Tag teams that invoked Mad Max was a big thing. Anyway, he's there and big size, impressive and all that. They put him in, a couple of tag title matches, but it doesn't last very long because his partner, when they're put in a tag team championship match, refuses to do the job and thinks it's not believable for us, the Blaster Masters, to lose to this team, so I refuse to job for the World Tag Team Champions.
Wow.
And just so you know, the World Tag Team Champions were Scott and Rick Steiner.
Wow.
And if you were ever like...
Was that a lie then? Did they just say that so they didn't have to get beaten up by the Steiners? It's like, I don't want to be potatoed today.
Actually, that's a pretty good idea. I'd be like, yeah, I don't feel like I should put them over.
Yeah.
I'm actually really scared.
I don't want to get bruised.
But I'd rather people think that I was full of shit than I was a coward. Yeah. So I'll just leave the wrestling business now if you don't mind. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because there's big plans for Kevin Nash, even though he can't be a Master Blaster. Next best thing. Because Dusty Rhodes has been in talks with the folks over at TBS and Turner Classic Movies. And they've got a great new idea which to use the classic Wizard of Oz IP, that hot IP. Wait for the Wizard of Oz MMO that'll be coming out for free to join but pay to win. Joe, do you know anything about the gimmick that I'm talking about? I believe it was our first live show I introduced you to the majesty of this.
We did an episode on silly gimmicks, and Oz was my favourite silly gimmick to come out of that episode. Oz, I couldn't quite get my head around it because he comes out dressed in a very cartoonish wizard outfit, kind of like the one you might see in the 70s in a cartoon show.
Yes.
And it's all designed and written by men in the shed on acid and in the 70s and stuff. And he comes out with a big rubber wizard mask on as well. And I was like, I thought he'd wrestle in the mask, which would be horrible. But no, he comes into the ring and he peels his face off.
And he does the mad eyes as well.
And then it's just this Kevin Nash guy underneath.
And don't forget, there's other important parts to this gimmick.
Well, he's got a little wizard that comes along with him.
Who's unpleasantly and unfortunately titled the Grand Master.
I thought he was the Great Wizard.
Oh, the Great Wizard! That was it. Or the Grand... Yeah, he was the Great Wizard.
Yeah, fake wrestling fan Kevin Mahan over here.
Did I even know the name of Kevin Nash? It was Kevin Sullivan, by the way.
Really?
Who was in there, yeah.
He was bloody tiny.
Little Kevin's... Well, I guess anyone beside Nash.
I know, but
he was
still.
stooped over.
Wow.
I'll tell you one thing. Kevin Sullivan can work a monkey. Like, he had that monkey which looked like it was going to try and rip off both his fake face and the real sweet face underneath. He was crawling all over him, and he still managed to pump out the "Welcome to Oz! Welcome to Oz!" So, Nash in this gimmick, I mean, it came up briefly once or twice on some of the little shoots we watched. What do you reckon, Kevin Nash? Cool, calm, collected, big, sexy Kevin Nash. What do you think his thoughts were on Oz?
Oh, I know what his thoughts were on Oz, and I know that he hated it. I don't know. I mean, fine. I'll add him to the list of wrestlers who don't appreciate their own gimmicks.
It's the stardust of his time,
yeah,
Joe. Yeah,
exactly. It's really silly. It's fun. Like, I understand it's not the best gimmick for, like, if you want to be a top star, but it's...
He's only new though, right?
Exactly.
That's the thing.
And I feel like lots of wrestlers don't appreciate, like, little gimmicks like this is what makes, you know, when a wrestler becomes a big deal, it's like little nuggets like this that make them really special, I think, to the fans. Because it's like, did you know they used to be this shit character? And it's really fun. And it's like, you know, you could show it to like a 5-year-old kid and they'd be like, ha 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 ha, and they'd love it.
And also as well, we need to point out, if you're a brand new wrestler to the business and all that, you only have a couple of years under your belt, and Dusty Rhodes has tailor-made a gimmick for you, I wouldn't be turning my nose up at any creation of the American dream, Dusty Rhodes, right?
Now, my biggest issue with the gimmick is I don't understand what the hell it has to do with the Wizard of Oz, because the Wizard in the Wizard of Oz looks nothing like that.
That's true. Or the Great Wizard.
Or the Great Wizard, yeah.
I mean, they did in the first instance. Remember, they had like Dorothy and the Tin Man and the Lion. They all showed up, and there's this like voiceover saying that they all had to go to Oz, which was ruled not over the benevolent wizard, but the evil, powerful Wizard of Oz. And they had like the big castle in the background, big fireworks, like a big curtain drops down to reveal the Emerald City. Like, there's so much into it.
Wow.
And the reverence which Dusty Rhodes talks about it, where he's like, I've been to an all-night fair, but I ain't ever seen nothing like this, Jim Ross. Like, Dusty is so into it.
Yeah.
It's one of those gimmicks, I think, maybe, if the performer in question put his whole weight behind it.
Yeah.
You know?
It's not like a, you know, career-long gimmick, but it's a fun... You know, it's like an Isaac Yankem. It's a funny little thing, little string to your bow. It just makes you more interesting, and it should challenge you. I don't know, any wrestler who gets given a gimmick like that should think of it as a bit of fun.
Throw yourself headfirst into it, right? Own the shit out of it.
It's
like
hard mode. This is the fun sub-story of the main game.
But there's nothing fun ever in wrestling. Like, you know, there's shit gimmicks, and shit gimmicks will always be around. But there's nothing worse than watching someone where I can see, and they're looking right down the lens, and they're connecting with me at home and saying, I am uncomfortable. How does that make the fan feel? You know, it's so crap. But I love, he was telling stories in some of the shoots he watched about, like, how the different men in the office tried to sell it to him. And Dusty had this like big vision. He was like making out that like Oz was going to be like the final boss.
Right.
And brother, they'd have to get through Dorothy, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion before they get their hands on Oz at the Clash of Champions. And that, of course, never happened.
Of course.
And Kevin Sullivan, the veteran, what his advice to Nash was about the big new gimmick was, for fuck's sake, Nash, they're paying you $46,000 a year. Take the money and do your job. So Oz doesn't work out. And despite the fact that actually, apparently, little known fact, over in Japan, during one of the very rare tours of, in the early 90s, WCW did of Japan, apparently Oz was very over. The fans would all chant, Ozzy, Ozzy,
That's because
Ozzy.
in Japan, they appreciate silly gimmicks.
Yeah.
They have just a general better understanding of humor.
Yes.
They don't take themselves so seriously.
They would be fucking big into Oz. I think Oz could have a big run in any company in Japan.
Bring Oz back, because like it doesn't matter who's under the mask, and like because they're gonna take it off anyway. It doesn't matter, but like they should bring back the essence of Oz.
There was a rumor at one point. And I swear I heard Nash kind of say that, yeah, he would have done it, but, you know, he's kind of, he'll pretty much do anything if it means he'll kind of get the nod or whatever to be a brief appearance on TV, I'm sure. But remember when they did, like, I told you they did, like, an anonymous general manager of Raw at one point, and it just came through, like, emails and stuff, and no one knew who it was. Well, apparently they were going to do a big thing at the end that, like, it was, like, behind the curtain, you would find it was just going to be Kevin Nash wearing the Wizard's hat, like, slowly typing on a laptop. And, like, as a silly payoff for a frustrating storyline, that would have been great, like,
yeah, that would have been funny.
But yeah, Nash, not a fan of Oz, apparently, you know, that's
no taste.
Fine, no taste. And his next gimmick that he gets, which was heavily inspired by a Steve Martin performance from a movie he did around the time, it's called Vinny Vegas. And this is him all dressed up in a nice kind of tuxedo, being a cool, laid-back, hey, oh, kind of a wise guy type of a character.
Right.
Nash in a tuxedo with sunglasses, that's a winning look as far as I'm concerned.
It's pretty good. It's not his best, but it's okay.
But a young Shawn Michaels, he sees Vinny Vegas on TV, and he's like, oh, this guy, oh man, I need this guy. He absolutely is blown away by him. He thinks, this is the man I need. Because Shawn Michaels has just lost Sensational Sherry as a manager. They've gotten rid of Luna as well as his manager. He needs someone new. And he's thinking, I need a big, strong, stoic dude. And he thinks that this dude, Vinny Vegas, who's big, but also has a sense of humor and can talk and can laugh at himself, he's the perfect fit. But it was here in WCW. This is where he met, like, Scott Hall. You know, originally they would have actually teamed up with Diamond Dallas Page and the Vegas connection, stuff like that. So he made a lot of his connections then. But Shawn wanted, like, he requested, he went up to Vince and he said, this is the guy that I want.
Wow.
And if he gets his release, will you hire him? And Vince is like, yeah, all right, sure, get his release. And Nash walked into the office and said, yeah, my wife doesn't want me to be a wrestler anymore. And the guy didn't even look up and just gave him his release. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, sorry to lose you. Sorry, Kev. Sorry about that.
Wow.
I mean, these 7-foot lads don't grow on trees, right?
No, but I guess, I don't know, maybe he wasn't trying very hard and they were like, yeah, whatever.
Well, Oz didn't work, Vinny Vegas didn't work. Like, what hope is it?
Yeah.
So he shows up then. He is the big, stoic bodyguard of Shawn Michaels, and he's Diesel, the big man. Now, these guys will go on to be known as two dudes with attitude. I know we've seen these guys a couple of times on Pay-Per-View Classic on the Patreon recently.
Yes.
Shawn and Diesel together. What do you think of these two guys?
They're cute.
Cute!
Well, because Shawn Michaels is really tiny.
Yeah.
And very nervous. And Kevin Nash is very big and very not nervous. He's very confident.
I think they balance each other out a little bit.
They do balance each other out. And I feel like Shawn kind of thought that would happen. Like, I feel like Shawn, when he saw Kevin Nash on WCW, he would be like, oh, he's got confident energy.
Yeah.
He'll balance me out, little anxious Shawn.
Yeah, I don't know if Nash would be giving him the little satin glove to rub on his face or anything like that. But this is kind of like now the kind of the building blocks of what will become known as the Clique. You've got Shawn and you've got Diesel. And these guys kind of go from being like kind of an act with, you know, a guy and a bodyguard to pretty quickly Diesel, you know, winning the Intercontinental title. They become tag team champions together. You know, you've got Scott Hall is brought into the mix. You know, they all kind of start working with each other. You know, Shawn knows of Scott now because Scott and Kevin were friends back in the day in WCW. And, oh, let's take this young little kid under our wing, this young 1-2-3 kid. We'll let him know kind of this is how our mindset is about wrestling. You know, we're going to help the young generation by helping this one kid. And then their favorite wrestler in WCW, who they used to make fun of because he had the shittest name, Terror Rising.
Oh, wow.
AKA Triple H.
Right.
And were you surprised to learn why Nash was so eager to get him involved in the Clique and their group?
They just liked him, didn't they? They just liked his character.
And also the fact that he was teetotal and sober.
Oh, well, apparently they didn't know that until after they got him signed and then also joined their group. And then they found out afterwards that he was teetotal. And they're like, oh, designated driver. This is actually great.
So there's kind of two things I want to maybe like chat with you about and try and tease apart a little bit. First thing is like kind of Nash's relationship with this group, the Clique, and kind of like the power that they have. And the idea of like a group of wrestlers having a lot of political sway and influence. Now, this is, you know, Bret Hart's worst nightmare and all that. You know, he's talked very, very disparagingly about this group. But in your mind, like kind of, it's the way they described it, I guess, in the documentary and through Nash's lens, this kind of group of like-minded, similar mindset wrestlers kind of working together, behind the scenes. Is that a positive thing, do you think? Or
I mean, yeah, obviously it's a good thing because, like,
we see a bit of that in AEW now, don't we? There's like lots of groups like that, I feel, of like-minded wrestlers.
Well, no, that's just that's different though. That's just kayfabe, isn't it?
Yeah, but they actually are booking stuff for themselves behind the scenes, like the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and the likes of that. They're all EVPs.
Very different.
Different, I guess.
Because in AEW, I mean, the Young Bucks, they're part owners of the companies. It's not exactly the rough and ready working man.
Yeah, all right, that's
each
true.
Other out, like
when you've got an executive title, it's probably a little bit different. Yeah. I'm sorry, I was wanting them to seem cool.
Yeah, I just want to talk about how much you love AEW.
I love AEW. Hello, I'm Kevin, and you can check us talking about AEW, and Joe liked a recent AEW pay-per-view. That's all on our Patreon page. Yeah. But the Click the Group, you think it's a positive, generally speaking, though?
I think, in theory, it's a positive. People coming together to share tips, information, stuff about like their paychecks, making sure they're all kind of being treated and paid in a similar way.
That's a real big one.
It is.
I think that one kind of goes by the wayside a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like you could almost come up with like a name for like when people come together and sort of almost like form a union.
Like kind of they're united almost.
Like unionizing to get rights for each other.
What's that?
But not like a union.
If there was a way for these wrestlers to come together in this figurative union of which you speak, and almost like kind of strike a bargain, kind of collectively.
Yeah, like maybe then they would have some semblance of power against the authority and the company that employs them. Then they could fight for their rights and stuff. And,
it makes me sick to my back teeth, actually, now that you say that, because, in this documentary, they kind of go out of their way and they really want you to know, like, Triple H is he's real passionate. He's like, you should all be thanking the likes of Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and myself and Sean, because by doing this, by coming together in this undefined collective group of people who kind of in a way collectively struck a bargain, if you will, about our remuneration.
For better rights,
he's fucking hopping on that thing. This union shit's great.
Yeah.
When it works for us.
But just for me and my close friends. Like, that's shit. If that's really what you're doing, you're just trying to make life better for you and the people closest to you, which I feel is very selfish, especially when the resulting factor of that will be that the people who are outside of that group will lose out, because by collectively bargaining for better positioning, power, pay for a few, it's got to be taken from somewhere.
Exactly,
it'll be taken from the people who aren't able to collectively unionize, which is why unions work the way they do.
Yeah, and like I think we look at the Click and kind of the blueprint for what they wanted. It was kind of like, you can have Kevin wrestle Scott, and then we could do Kevin and Sean versus, Scott and the 1, 2, 3 kid, Sean Waltman. We can all kind of do this together and kind of ensure that we're all kind of kept on even footing. And that kind of, it worked in many respects, because this era that Nash came into was post-Hogan. This was probably the lowest kind of amount of business that the WWF ever had. It was a year or two after Vince McMahon had been taken to court by the federal government in the steroid scandal. So I think it wasn't necessarily their intention, but they did kind of end up making a lot of stars all at once by doing that. But I think there's a lot of people who weren't on that Click gravy train, and it's as if there was a lot of good, payouts to be going around at the time. This was during a time where, Kevin Nash had said in shoot interviews that catering was ham sandwiches, and you were lucky if it was.
Well, that's why it was ham sandwiches, because all the money was going to the Click salary.
Yeah, and I think as well, like it stands a lot to Vince McMahon, like that he was able to seemingly all throughout the 80s and the late 90s kind of keep all the pay secret, because Hogan's not going to go into the dressing room with other people going, oh man, I got $500,000 for that Madison Square Garden show. That's amazing. Good job, everyone. No. No one's telling anyone anything like that. And I think that's kind of shit. Like, honestly, I remember, 1 or 2 jobs that I went for when I first kind of qualified as a teacher. and kind of walking in and someone just goes, here's the salary, there you go. And I walked out going, okay, will this be my job? And then like another teacher going to me, and this is how I got into being in a union when I was in school. My union rep went to me and goes, oh shit, you're meant to get all these extra bits because, go back in there and renegotiate. And I was like, fucking hell, like I could barely hide my anger that someone was willing to hire me for less money than, not like I could have negotiated, but I was actually entitled to as the rules state. And I think, it's just sad that like maybe the main lesson that's been learned from the clique is like, oh, it's good to have friends in wrestling because then you can make money.
Well, that's exactly it. Like I feel like, all that stuff about Triple H being like, oh, the people should be grateful for the clique. It's like all they've done is help other, let's admit it, white wrestlers who are men make friends with other white wrestlers who are men and collectively bargain for better pay for just them and their friends. Like, that still goes on today, I'm sure of it.
But I can't think of anyone from that lineup that we're talking about who probably gained more from being in this group than Kevin Nash.
Oh, really?
Well, think about it. Like, in WCW, he's literally, like, he's 3 gimmicks into a run where, obviously, like, if they're not even looking up when he's walking out the door and the lad's 7 foot...
Yeah.
And a great fucking body, by the way. Like he's
not much of a wrestler, is he?
But like this is during a time where that could be the least important thing in the world.
I disagree.
But I feel though, like he says that like on that first taping where he showed up, like he in this, shows up in the tracksuit. They do like back-to-back Raw tapings. He said he learned more in 3 hours than he had in 3 years in WCW. And like Scott Hall, a lot more of like, for lack of a better term, a nerd for wrestling than Nash ever was. Same with Sean Waltman, avid wrestling fan. Triple H, avid like student of the business. And Nash, I feel like kind of by osmosis got all this kind of, he had a passion of a sort, but he's not Mr. like, I'm going to be up till 5 in the morning looking at old tapes and talking about Harley race finishes with Triple H. No, he's just kind of picking up this from being in this group. I think he was very well served being in this group. But the other question I want to ask you about is his relationship with Vince McMahon and what you reckon to that.
Well, he says himself that he saw Vince as a father figure.
Really? We can add another one to our stable. Yeah. All my sons. Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset.
It'd be interesting to see if this ever happens with a woman being like, oh, Vince is like a
dad.
father figure. Can you imagine? Never, ever, ever, ever happen. Never.
I mean,
even Stephanie wouldn't say her father's like a father figure.
to put it in perspective about how fucked up this father figure thing is, right? Nash just casually mentions Vince is like, like a father figure to me. And he cut to Triple H in this documentary, and he says, in this business, you need a father figure like Vince, because when you become champion, everyone else becomes jealous and is after you. So you need a father figure like Vince McMahon, who Triple H also, by the way, also considers a father figure. And Shawn Michaels as well also considers a father figure.
Pretty sure Scott Hall said as well.
Yeah.
Kurt Angle definitely did.
And yeah, I don't know, if your dad's telling you that everyone's jealous of you.
Which is definitely, by the way, what was happening.
Oh, unbelievable.
Oh, by the way, everyone's jealous of your opportunities and you can only trust me, Vince McMahon.
Here's a question. Do you think Vince McMahon ever played members of the clique off against one another? As in, do you think that he got in Sean's ear going, well, big man over there, Kevin Nash, or goes into Scott Hall's ear and says, well, 1, 2, 3 kids coming up there. Do you think he would be as brazen as to do that?
No, I don't think so, because I don't think that would benefit him. Because if he did that, that would splinter the group, which would then, if you think about their collective organisation, it benefits him that they're all in a clique together, because it means that they don't talk about their salaries to other wrestlers, like mid-carders. Yeah. And that's, I think, what Vince would really want to stop from happening. Yeah. So if they splintered...
So kind of contain it almost.
Contain it all to one group. And then that way, if you whisper in the group's ear, oh, everyone hates you, no one likes you, and oh, you're just best off together alone because you're the best. Because otherwise, if you don't do that, they're going to go off and tell everyone else what they've all learned, and Vince wouldn't want that. So
this group, and Nash in particular, kind of do believe that they had Vince around their little finger.
No, Vince had them around his little finger.
It's so interesting to hear your perspective on that.
I don't think anyone has ever had Vince McMahon around their finger, ever.
I think you kind of like...
I mean, definitely they benefited from their relationship with him. But I think that was intentional on his part. I think he thought of it as a mutually beneficial relationship. I don't think he would have thought of as being hard done by the situation.
Well, I think it was definitely mutually beneficial because, if you look at, this era we're talking about, post-Hogan, post-steroid scandal, and Vince McMahon is trying to push this idea of like a new generation. We've done a lot of new generation stuff over on Pay-Per-View Classique actually recently, because I know you wanted to see a lot of Brett and you wanted to see Simone, and we've seen a lot of Diesel and the two dudes with attitude as well as a result of that. And like, to say that Vince benefited from these guys, oh my God, that's an understatement, because they had their finger on the pulse. And I think Nash is probably one of the few wrestlers who was like in a tippity top spot and actually knew what the general, like, pop culture wise, kind of what the kids like, what's popular music, movies. Like, Nash has had several characters, including Diesel, by the way, based off of characters in movies that he said. You talk about, you know, Scott Hall, he's doing something that's based off of, you know, of a movie as well. Like, a lot of this kind of media's brought in. Like, I don't think Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Undertaker or Hulk Hogan had a fucking clue what was hot in pop culture at the time when they were on top.
No, absolutely not.
No way.
No way.
But we watched those in your house shows in the new generation, and yeah, cringy and cheesy as it is now, but like, to see like rap in 1993 in wrestling in 1994 on Vince McMahon's show, yeah, it's probably like 10 years too late in many respects, but they dragged him kicking and screaming into something vaguely resembling a modern wrestling show.
Yeah.
But I think Vince liked Big Daddy Cool, Kevin Nash. He liked Diesel because he was a big guy, but also he was a naturally big guy. And I think he thought of him as the next Hulk Hogan.
Do you think?
Absolutely. Within a year, Joe, he made him the World Wrestling Federation champion. Within a year!
I don't know if he really thought he was the next Hulk Hogan.
Well, not necessarily like he was going to be a star of the magnitude of Hulk Hogan, but his next kind of Hogan figure.
Oh, I see.
He would be like the central kind of piece
Yeah.
of this kind of new generation.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear to see that Vince McMahon really likes Kevin Nash.
Yeah.
And you can see why. Like, anything you know about Vince, you can see that he would admire in Kevin Nash. And the fact that, like, Kevin Nash comes from this, like, you know, he earned his basketball scholarship. He came up through sports. He went to the army. He then, worked in a strip club as a floor manager. That's all stuff that Vince would admire.
I think Vince likes the most, though, that he's a charming, intelligent man. That's it. And
he's funny.
And he's funny, yeah.
Vince loves someone with a sense of humour who doesn't take themselves too seriously.
Like, that twinkle that Vince gets in his eye.
Oh, when they're talking.
You see a lot of footage of that in the documentary, which is one good bit, is that you get to see a lot of, like, kind of behind the scenes kind of B-roll of Nash as Diesel, hanging around with Vince. And Vince he hasn't got the Sean twinkle in his eye.
That's different, though. That's more like Sean's his special little, his youngest child, his special precious baby.
Special boy.
Whereas Kevin Nash is kind of like
that cool kid across the street who wants to get Moa's lawn.
Like the friend,
give him $20 to do it.
The cool friend of his lame son. It's like, I wish my son was more like this guy.
I kind of think it's funny that they said up front in this documentary, and, Vince says it, and Nash is kind of, he's poked fun at this fact that, Vince viewed him as being, like, the face of the new generation, Because, like, if I think a new generation, and particularly from the recent stuff that you and I have watched for over on the Patreon, I think of, like, Brett and Sean. I don't think of Diesel. I mean, he's there for sure. He's an important part, but I don't think of him as, like, that's the new generation right there. I mean, it's like, that's a big tall dude for sure,
Walking around.
So he does become the WWF champion not that far into his WWF tenure, beating Bob Backlund at a live event, like not on television, live event, wins the title off Bob Backlund, who would have been considered kind of the old-timey wrestler, in 8 seconds.
Wow.
And that's kind of a vote of confidence there. What do you think of the idea of, like, putting the title on someone on, like, a house show, like on a non-televised event like that?
It happens quite a lot these days.
Oh, yeah, that happened in NXT. I swore at one point Samoa Joe won the title off Finn. Yeah. It's a neat idea, I guess, to kind of have someone win and it be kind of, out of the blue and all that jazz.
Yes, it doesn't really mean anything to me, to be honest.
Yeah. I think, like, what their idea behind it was that apparently, like, the business that they were doing at Madison Square Garden was really, really low. So the idea is that if you change the title in a house show, it would make people think, we should go to these house shows because we might see something exciting happening at that result. So he has a year run, basically, with the world title, despite the fact that he has still, at this point, I would say, quite a limited moveset.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I was wondering, like, we're going to get into our first Nash match now, but having seen him a few times on the pay-per-view classics and all that, was the moveset shocking to you? Was the repertoire or was the wrestling style of Kevin Nash a shock to you at all?
No, it was pretty much exactly as I thought it would be.
How would you describe the work style, the kind of the wrestling stance and the fighting style of Kevin Nash?
He takes it slow.
Yeah.
He takes his time, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think more wrestlers need to do that, especially in this day and age. I'd say that's like the main failing of modern wrestling is not enough wrestlers understand the value of just taking your time with something.
Jim Ross, Joe Ross over here, like, slow it down, take it slow. These kids, too many high spots, like.
No, I'm not talking about with the wrestling.
Okay.
I'm talking about just generally.
Oh, this is your energy level almost,
just like. I feel like silence says as much as, like, a sentence does, and it's all about positioning and where you decide to pause and how you decide to pause. And, like, if you take any kind of acting class, at a particular level, they will teach you how to use silence as a tool.
I think he's quite good at that because
he is, yeah.
It is weird when you see his promos as Diesel as the WWF champion, where he's almost putting on this kind of fake tough guy voice,
yes.
which I don't think is as cool as his actual voice.
Yes, definitely.
Which, with age, it's only gotten cooler.
Yeah.
And sexier.
And as we saw in the clips from the WWE documentary as well, it was Vince that kind of brought that out of him.
Yeah.
Accentuated it more, and he was like, slow it down. Slow it down.
Vince is all into the idea of this big cool giant. I
Yeah.
think like that's like one of Vince's, like, if he could have that with like most of his tall guys, if they had this kind of cool demeanor, and that's it, like, as Diesel, he wouldn't be screaming and shouting, he'd come out with kind of a little smirk on his face.
Yeah.
He comes out with a little bit of a saunter and a bit of a swagger. He's not like running to the ring. This guy's probably like the polar opposite energy wise of the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that I think he probably has the same number of moves at his disposal as the Ultimate Warrior. I'm not going to lie, I was terrified going into this, in many respects, these matches, because we had already seen Diesel versus Shawn at In Your House, Good Friends, Better Enemies, which was a fabulous match. And we had also seen Bret versus Diesel from King of the Ring 94, our most recent pay-per-view classic, which was also a really great match. And I worried that we had already seen Kevin Nash's two greatest matches before we settled into this.
Yeah.
But we had one here that I thought was a very fitting one as well, capping off a near year-long reign as the World Wrestling Federation champion. This takes us to Survivor Series 1995 as Bret the Hitman Hart challenges the WWF champion Diesel. And Diesel has a little pre-match promo where he's got that special early episode of the podcast deep voice. I had this, Sam had it, Billy had it, I think Adam had it. Did you have it?
Yeah.
Did you have the little deep voice early on? What is it, Joe? I thought it was just a boy thing. I'm not sure what's going on.
No, it's not discovering your podcasting voice.
Aww.
It's what we actually sound like when we're not trying to perform.
Oh, it's not true. That's true. If you sounded like...
it's what we used to sound like.
It's what we used to sound
and
like.
And now we've podcasted so much, we just sound like this.
We sound really engaged all the time. Even when I'm like, just in my pants making pancakes.
Boom, on, banter, go.
So this is a big fight feel, a big old match. Fucking hell, Bret Hart coming out here. I always get like a little chill run up my spine now when I see Bret Hart.
Oh, why is that?
Just because, like, I think it's one of the great things about doing that pay-per-view classic series with you. And I feel like fans of the show now understand, and you've articulated so well why you like Bret. It feels like every time Bret comes out, I don't want to say the match is secondary, but it feels like there's so much more going into your enjoyment of a match with Bret other than, is he going to pop in the sharpshooter? Is he going to win? Is he going to lose? And can you explain, and maybe fans who hadn't checked out the Patreon, what is your love of Bret seems to have grown in the last year for sure.
It has grown. I think it's just the more I learn about him, the more I like him. I didn't think much of him before we did the episode on Bret Hart.
Yeah.
I did those wrong wrestling shirts, and I did his as Shawn Michaels.
Are you officially saying you'd be one of those people who would blush if you saw it at a wrestling show now?
I do feel a bit bad that someone wore it to meet Bret Hart.
Joe, no! Did that happen? Oh my god!
That actually happened. They went to a meet and greet.
How dare you!
Apparently
How dare you sell them at Wrong Wrestling Shirts at .teespring.com?
Apparently he was quite sweet and a bit confused. Gently corrected them and said, "That's not Shawn Michaels. That's me, Bret Hart."
I'm Bret Hart. The best there is, the best there was.
But it's not just that. It's just like, the more I learn about him, the more I like him. Like the clip of him in The Simpsons is very charming, but even more charming is the clip of him talking about him being in The Simpsons and how it's so cool. And he obviously doesn't know what The Simpsons is. And it's very charming. And then there's this other clip that was shown to me recently where he talks about his love of Sting and just appreciates Sting. And it's just like, there's often stuff just going around about Bret. Just
you get people who will tweet you a couple of times a week where it's like, hey, here's Bret just talking about something.
Yeah.
It feels like it means more when it comes from Bret. Does that make sense? Like if Bret's going to talk about a certain topic, or if Bret says he likes a wrestler, has good opinions of a wrestler, that seems to resonate you a lot more than kind of a random wrestler or podcaster chatting about it.
I think it's for a few reasons. So one, it's that Bret's not a politician and he's never tried to be. When I learned that when he went to WCW, he was given his own changing room and he was like, no, I don't want that. Take it away. Never insult me by doing that again. Like, he's one of the boys. And, I really respect that. I think in a time when, there was a lot of politicking going wrong around someone in particular who we may do an episode on right now.
Maybe.
And
hey, they're both earning 7 figures. Like, come on. One guy decided to opt in for the free room you get with that fucking ridiculous contract.
And I like that, I feel like a lot of wrestlers don't like Bret Hart because he's sulky. And I feel like in wrestling, if you're a man, you have to fight all the time, and if someone does something you don't like, you have to be a piece of shit and fight them.
Yeah.
Whereas Bret, he'll just moan. I like that. Lots of fans hate
it's
that.
Relatable.
A lot of fans think it's whiny and entitled, but whatever. You're entitled to that opinion. I'm entitled to mine. I like whiny Bret. I like that he's sulky. I relate to that.
Because the reason I bring it up is when we were on that initial kind of rabbit hole with looking at Nash stuff and all that, and it's like there was a few wobbles early on where you're like, oh, okay. This guy isn't just kind of cool and charismatic and charming. There's you saw a little bit of that nasty streak to him, or a little bit of that kind of, not necessarily cruel, but kind of in it for himself, the kind of very self-centered viewpoint, which, absolutely entitled to have in wrestling, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, lots of people do.
But you literally turned to me and you were like, what does Bret think about Nash? You needed to, that was that what struck me,
He's my measuring stick.
Yeah.
Generally with people in this era, because he's been around for a long time, so he's come into contact with a lot of people. And because he was one of the boys, he's heard, from the lower card people, what other people are like. And I feel you learn more about someone with how they treat people who are beneath them, in inverted commas, than how they treat, Bret Hart themselves.
How would you describe, or what did you get then as the kind of the view or the relationship between Bret Hart and Kevin Nash then?
I mean, what, in this match?
Oh, no, it's not kind of generally speaking before we got into it, It's
hard to say because, obviously they've known each other a long time.
Yeah.
And their paths have crossed in different ways in different places, and there's been tensions, obviously, with the Montreal Screwjob.
Yeah, I should point out as well, for all the chats we've said about Kevin Nash being cerebral and intelligent and all that, the big asterisk is that this man wined and dined on being a Montreal Screwjob truther for far too long. Far too many red wine-laden shoot interviews talking about how it was a work, right? Okay? And I get if you're just saying it because it's what the shoot interviewer wants to hear, but...
You'll get more pasta that way. Go on, Nash, if you say it's at work, we'll give you an extra spoonful. We'll give you thirds.
I loved watching this match with you. The start of it, just what kind of reminded me was that there was 3 or 4 people in the front row who all had their own Bret signs who looked like they were about to burst into tears when they saw the guy. Very, very invested in Bret Hart. Potential mistresses, some of them maybe, who knows?
Yeah. I don't like the harmonica music for Diesel's entrance as much as the horrible horn truck sounds.
All right, yeah, this is where we vary greatly, because we had Diesel and Bret, was our most recent pay-per-view classic, and Diesel comes out to... and like even when he won the title off Backlund, it's like, I listen to the fans in Madison Square Garden all going yay to the sounds of. How do you prefer that to do 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 do? That's the best ever, right?
Not for Diesel.
Why?
Because he's a horrible man who's called Diesel, which is like a truck, and then he has the truck horn sounds, and they're horrible,
but
and
he's
they're
cool.
loud, and they're big.
He's cool, Big Daddy cool. He's
no,
gotta have
the
that.
harmonica is like the harmonica thing is like the type of music you'd give Elias or someone. It's like Walk with Diesel. Like.
I think it's literally the Big Show's theme slowed down a little bit. Like you could go really slow. Well, get ready for something. But you're a fan of you would rather Diesel come out to that horrible sound of diesel power.
Yeah.
Interesting that.
Much prefer that.
Vince McMahon on commentary here promises us a good old time tonight in Madison Square Garden. We get the Brett gif at the start of the match.
I know.
Oh!
The famous, the iconic Brett gif with the eyebrows.
There's a little bit of funny business there.
Charming.
Very charming.
Absolutely, even more charming in video than it is in a gif.
Yeah, these two guys like kind of have like there's almost so much charm in this ring right now. It's
why does he do the charming face? What was he doing?
He just looked at someone in the audience and went,
That's his mistress then.
I mean, I just like this is why I love so much about this match. It's face versus face, right? Which is kind of always like an interesting dynamic to do, but they kind of go quite early into the idea of like, you know, Diesel getting a little bit more frustrated and resorting to a little bit more of the kind of the street fight and a bit less of that kind of pure wrestling. And like, I was really excited to watch it because I know the last time we watched Brett and Diesel, it was like Brett playing like a game of chess and just trying to slowly figure out the moves to take this big man down. And almost that little eye at the start to me was kind of like, well, I almost beat him once before. I'll probably do it now. You know, it just there was like that. It just exuded a little bit of confidence, which I felt like if they hadn't had a match before, which kind of ended in a DQ or whatever, it wouldn't have been founded. But I just kind of like that. It's like Brett kind of giving you that like he's confident here.
It's just it seemed so silly.
Yeah, but it worked for me.
For me, it felt like he was pulling a face to one of his kids. Like he was like, "Hey kids, here's your wacky dad." I love it. I love it. I don't care why he did it. I love it.
I thought it was the right little bit of energy for this match here, which begins with Toru Diesel and Brett Yano removing all the protective coverings on the turnbuckles and all that. That was an odd way to start.
Yes.
I mean, I liked it. It kind of added this, like, it was almost like the Chekhov's gun type of thing. It's like, all right, there's two exposed turnbuckles, so we have to keep our eyes open for that. It raised the tension quite early. I
do feel, though, like they should make the turnbuckle look more different when it hasn't got a cover on. Because I always forget when they take the turnbuckle cover off that it's off because it looks quite similar.
It's just this little kind of, this tiny nut, which I think they need to make bigger.
Exactly, yeah. Know? It's hard when they're taking away something and there's like, oh no, the really dangerous thing is actually really small and hard to see. Like they should like paint it sparkly or something so it's like eye-catching. Or
have an LED coming off it or something like that.
Yeah.
Or turn into a big target or something like that instead.
Or do what AEW do and have a camera.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Turnbuckle so you can actually see the little nut.
Yeah, that's actually really good. That's probably one of the best things about having that turnbuckle cam is that you can see that close up. But pray for the poor people in the audience who don't get to see anything of the sort. They just have to take our word for it. Like that there's a very, very small nut all the way down there in that ring. Vince McMahon says on commentary that both of these men are great role models. And I would think that if you could cherry pick certain values from both Nash and Brett, you would get someone who has exceptional values and is a great role model.
Yeah.
But certain ones you might want to avoid.
Definitely. Yeah, you wouldn't want to hit randomize on those traits.
No, you don't want to get someone who's too lazy to moan like they want to deep down inside. So we have some big man dominating less big man action, but Diesel gets frustrated early on and comes out with a chair. And this is great. Diesel, he starts spitting in his hands. This was something that I liked a lot. He starts going and kind of rubbing it like he's going to relish what he's going to do to Brett. There's a few little things that Diesel does in the ring that I really like, where he kind of rubs his hands together. There's times where he throws people into a corner and he kind of like, does a little like picture, like, like a director looking at what a picture would look like on screen. And I do like it, particularly because it is hiding the fact that the man probably has a moveset more limited than Omos in 2021.
Really, more? I don't know, because he's taken a bump.
That's true.
Omos has never taken a bump.
Yet to do that. But could you... How many moves do you think that Nash has, like, that he can do? Because he does the powerbomb, that's his finisher. And what other things does he usually do in a match? Did you notice any of his things that he does?
He punches, he kicks.
Yeah.
Does an Irish whip.
That's less of a move and more of like an element of a move.
Really?
Yeah, you have to put him against the ropes to then do a move.
I don't know. There, okay.
Just a big boot.
Isn't that just a kick?
Oh yes, there's a kick, yeah.
If I had to guess, I'd say he's got 7 moves.
You reckon he's got 7 of them?
I couldn't name them all.
Jim Cornette insists that there's 5, including the hair flip, but I think there's probably closer to 7. I think so. I mean, it feels like a cruel question to ask at this point, but like when he was wrestling Bret here in this match, and I thought they were telling like a really interesting story of like the big guy getting frustrated with his lack of success by being powerful, and then Bret just slow and steady going after the legs and trying to break the big man down. And you know, they didn't do a lot of flashy stuff here.
Yeah.
But like, did Diesel entertain you? Did he enthrall you? Did he get you in this match?
Not especially, but he didn't not get me either.
He didn't like blow your mind in this one, did he?
No.
Really? Okay.
No.
Okay. I'm gonna say like I'm a big fan like a lot of the little elements here of like, you know, when Bret goes like, you know, the figure 4, you know, onto his leg, and if there's
and his legs don't bend that way.
Well, like that's what kind of made it really like exciting for me. It's like there's no way this man's legs are going to bend. You know, the attacks to the legs he does sell when appropriate, I guess. But yeah, I thought I was kind of watching you a bit during this, and it felt like he wasn't kind of cutting through to you almost.
No.
Both men do kind of resort to kind of slight kind of trickery. Bret at one point getting a wire to tie up Big Daddy Cool, and this is probably my favorite moment of the entire match.
Yeah, Bret got a cable and he tied up Diesel.
He was kind of like essentially clamped to the ring post, and Bret started stabbing at him with the chair and all. It was pretty vicious stuff from Bret, like.
It was, yeah, I liked that actually.
And like, yeah, it was like, I have to say, a bit of a masterpiece. As we have seen on this podcast before, people try and tie little knots.
It's hard.
And to tie a knot that small, which was then big enough that Kevin Nash could then untie himself.
Well, not just that, but like, you know, Kevin struggled in the knot for a while, and there were a couple of times where he tried to kick Bret with his leg tied up and stuff, and it still didn't come undone. But as you say, it wasn't tied up so securely that it was impossible for Nash to untie it.
Bret has to have been in Scouts or something like that. I think so,
but I also have another theory, which is that Kevin Nash is actually the master of knots.
And what are you basing this theory on? I mean, he did get the turnbuckle cover off very, very easily.
He did, whereas Bret struggled.
He did, yeah.
And Bret, obviously, a lot more familiar with rings and turnbuckles. He's probably assembled and disassembled more rings than I've had hot dinners.
I don't think Kevin Nash has ever disassembled a ring somehow.
No.
I have a funny feeling he's not had to bring it up 10 flights of stairs or whatever it is.
Also, in one of the pay-per-view Classic matches we watched, there was a bit where Shawn Michaels was trying to take off a turnbuckle cover in the middle of a Diesel match.
Oh, yeah.
And he couldn't do it. And Diesel had to take time out of the match to undo the turnbuckle cover. And there was another instance as well where, again, Kevin Nash undid a tie. I was like, oh, that's very impressive. He did that very quickly. Maybe because he's got strong fingers. I don't know.
Hidden skill set, though. I mean, it's a good thing to have in wrestling. There's nothing more embarrassing than someone trying to remove a turnbuckle cover and they simply can't.
Yeah.
I've seen Steve Austin tuck a few turnbuckle pads after losing his rag with it, like, after a while. This is the part of the match which kind of really stands out to me, where get a moment where we have Bret getting hit into that exposed turnbuckle. He goes that chest first spot that he does, which is really fucking horrible, particularly because Bret has previously cracked his sternum, and that is not a nice injury to get. But Bret then gets sent off the ring apron, and this is like not kind of like teased or set up, it just happens out of nowhere. Bret goes sailing off the apron through the Spanish announce table in 1995.
So yeah, that was the first time that ever happened, right?
In WWF, it was the first time, yeah.
Wow.
And Bret literally said in his book, it's like, I heard there was this guy in ECW called Sabu who was doing tables, so we thought we'd do the table spot. So we did. Like, you know.
Again, another reason I respect Bret, because he wasn't like, yeah, I did it for the first time ever. Instead, he was like, yeah, this other guy did it, and then I copied him.
I kind of feel like Bret is never the one who's like having to explain, actually, I was the person who did this, or anything like that. Whereas Nash, it feels like he's always explaining, no, you think I did this, but I didn't do this.
Yeah, or you think I didn't do that, but I did actually, and it was amazing.
There's a lot more similarities between Nash and Russo than a lot of the other people we've done episodes on. But like, just in the sense that he feels like a lot of the times, and I'm not talking about the modern man now, because he feels definitely at peace now, but it feels like a lot of his late career, particularly, and a lot of those interviews where he's talking about moments like this, he feels like he's always on the back foot trying to explain himself or make you realize that the question you're asking is completely wrong. You've no right to ask me that question whatsoever. Like, Bret does kind of make out in this match that he did this great favor for Diesel. He made Diesel look like this absolutely unstoppable giant.
I mean, he did allow himself to go through a table for him, yeah.
Yeah, and we have, Bret can't even get picked up for the jackknife powerbomb.
Yeah, he just slips right through. Loved that.
That was a really cool moment.
That's how to sell.
Like, Bret basically said in as many words here, this man is better than me, essentially. Yeah. And then we get the roll-up out of nowhere. All the while, the Spanish announcers are like, all right, I'm assuming this is never going to happen again. This is like an aberration. Like, assumingly they'll go through the other table next time. This is just like, I don't know, just a weird thing. Like, it's the first time. It won't happen again. They'll get the memo. We get the quick roll-up from Bret. Diesel's pissed. He comes and he starts attacking all the referees. It's a full heel turn. He does 2 jackknives to Bret Hart and he screams, I'm back. And Bret writes in his book, the way that Diesel acts here was like a betrayal of some sort, because he throws the belt down to him and says, don't forget who did the fucking favor to you. And Bret was like, I couldn't believe it. I'd done so much for Kev in that match, and I always got on with him, and he threw it right back in my face there at the end of it. And
was he not doing that in character?
I thought it was. Like, it seemed like pure character here. But again, it's just so funny, like, when we're talking about all these kind of fragile egos, and then you've got like someone where, we were talking about how kind of well-adjusted Bret seems, and then it feels like, well, judging from his book there, that feels like that doesn't seem well-adjusted at all, you know? It was classic example, I think, again, a classic example of Vince McMahon kind of moving the chess pieces around. We're basically saying to one guy, you're actually the star of the new generation, and the other guy, but you're actually the star of the new generation. Yeah. Whereas I feel fans at the end here would probably not really know who was the star of the new generation, but they'd probably guess it was Bret and not Diesel. What did you think of this match? I have a funny feeling you didn't like it as much as the other encounter that they had.
Yeah, I didn't. I mean,
even though that other match ended in like a DQ and all that.
Yeah, the other match ended worse. But this one, it was a bit slow. I feel this is typical, like, Kevin Nash, just like wandering around doing his small, like, moves, his few moves.
It says a lot that you enjoyed the match that ended in a DQ more, and I think that probably was because Shawn was in that match running around and doing all this other kind of extra cool stuff on the outside. You had Jim Neidhart there as well. There was lots of kind of extracurricular stuff almost there.
Yeah, I feel it's because like the story of this match was Diesel having the upper hand on Bret. So it was a lot of Bret kind of giving way to Diesel and selling for him, which, Bret's really good at and I do find entertaining, but it's not as fun for me as like the match Diesel and Bret had, because like in that one, Bret kind of has more of an upper hand, and he's kind of like, he seems a bit more competitive.
Because Bret here is the challenger, I guess. Yeah. That you feel like Diesel has to be in control, but I think if anything, it does show you that there's not a very deep move set there. And it's not all about moves, of course not. But when the pace is elbow, knee, punch.
And like, I'll be the first to admit that, like, moveset isn't like the main thing that's important to me about a wrestler's ability. For me, mouthing off is more entertaining than actually being a good wrestler. And yet he doesn't do any of that either. Like, his in-ring, seeing as he is such a charismatic and funny guy who understands character work so well, it doesn't feel like he's giving us much of that character in the match.
No, he doesn't like talk or say much.
No.
He's got that kind of, that's not just a Diesel thing. That's often, and Bret does this as well. I feel like the fucking code of silence to hit all wrestlers in the mid-90s that were not allowed to say anything during our matches.
Yeah, like I want a couple of taunts and stuff. I want some crowd work.
So tell me, this match, which some people, I think Diesel himself, old Nash, has said that he considers that his best match.
Yeah, I think you're right there, that he does think that.
Yeah, so I was wondering what your thoughts are, what's your review, what's your star rating, I should ask.
I gave it 3 stars out of 5. It
feels like you're being very nice there.
I am being nice, but I do feel like if I gave it any lower, I would be being a bit harsh.
Yeah, fair.
Like, it's a fine match. There's not anything wrong with it. But But yeah, it just didn't do anything special for me. Didn't love it. I certainly wouldn't want to watch it again.
Yeah, I think it's more like, usually with these matches, when you come into it watching it and you have in the back of your head, this is meant to be Diesel's best match, but the main takeaway from it is like, wow, Bret brought Diesel to his best match.
Yeah.
And, I feel like that's, again, like, I guess why Bret probably likes this match is that it's kind of a roundabout, compliment for Bret instead of Diesel.
Yeah.
Like, so... So, this kind of, the loss of the title and all that, we then go into a heel run from there. He feuds with The Undertaker. He feuds with Shawn Michaels after that as well. Him and Undertaker have a match at WrestleMania 12, I believe it was. But it was around this time where they were kind of looking, and when I say they, I mean him and Scott Hall, they were looking at pastures green because there were offers coming in and their contracts were coming up and they were working hard, I think the thing people tend to forget is that even though Nash was the lowest drawing champion of his era or whatever, and it was wrestling was less popular then, I think a lot of us might kind of think, oh, if wrestling's less popular, they're going to be having less shows, right? But if anything, they were having more shows. So they were traveling 300 days a year. They were fucking going crazy. And if you're the champion and you're a big tall dude like that, yeah, he's not wrestling those high octane matches, but it kind of it's a schedule that burns you, I think. And we see that even in modern day, that WWE schedule, which is a lot lighter now than it was then. And you have the benefit.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you probably wrestle, I would say, 200 to 250 days a year as opposed to 300.
But you think of all the other work that you're expected to do now?
Yeah. But don't worry, they made sure they can't do any of that really horrible stuff like Twitch or OnlyFans.
Oh, right. You can't make any money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But hey, they're not eating ham sandwiches, I guess.
Yeah.
But I read from a shoot interview with the Young Bucks where they were this is many years later, they were doing the house show loop in TNA with Nash, and the finish of the match was meant to be every night that they do this big springboard and Nash hits the big boot, bam, kicks the Young Bucks out of the sky, 1, 2, 3, and every single night on the tour, Nash misses the boot by a country mile. And they come up to him, they're kind of a bit scared to at the start because it's Kevin Nash, he's the big guy, and he's the legend. And they come up to him and go, Kev, do we need to do it a little bit differently? Can you not hit us or square or anything like that? And he's like, it's a house show, guys. People are going to react for the finishers, your entrance, and your taunt. They don't give a shit about anything else. They're not even going to pay attention. They won't know. They won't care. And I don't think it's that to that level.
No.
Because I've sat close by in wrestling shows, and I would think that if people were deliberately not making any contact at all, I would feel a little hard done by.
Yeah, and also there's a reason Kevin Nash has the reputation he has, and it's because of stuff like that.
Shit like that.
So people do notice, they do care.
Yes.
And they forgive you because you're Kevin Nash and we expect it of you. If the Young Bucks did that, there would be outrage.
But hey, if you happen to see Kevin Nash at a house show and you got your 45 quid's worth because you were able to appreciate him working smart and not hard, then more power to you. But I would feel a lot of folks might feel a little hard done by in that sense. But I don't begrudge anyone, particularly in that mid-90s, for searching out something better. And I think the thing that's important to realize when Kevin Nash left the World Wrestling Federation, he went to WCW for a lot more money with Scott Hall. He was kind of doing something that hadn't really been done that much before, which was basically playing the sides off against each other and taking advantage of what he knew was someone in Eric Bischoff who had a lot of money at his disposal and a great need and urgency to ramp up the excitement on his show, but didn't necessarily have the experience in the wrestling business to be completely immune to all the tricks and the charm and all that. He wrote Vince a letter saying, here's why I'm not coming back, and I'm not quitting, I'm just not letting my contract roll over and be re-signed.
Right.
And I think that's kind of a classy enough thing to do. But we talked about it in the Scott Hall episodes. These guys pretty much wrote their own ticket.
Yeah.
And I still to this day am in awe at the amount of money they got and the limited schedule they got themselves on.
Yeah.
It is something, is that something to aspire to in wrestling?
No, not in wrestling, but I do think it's something to aspire to in capitalism.
Yeah, in what sense?
In the sense that I think really that's the dream, isn't it? To get a job at some new company which has more money than sense, and you're kind of seen as the veteran of the industry, even though we all know we're not really that much of a veteran. We're kind of still quite new compared to some people.
Still, if you're talking about 96, he's only 5 or 6 years, really, actually,
Yeah.
that he's in it.
When you think of, like, other people who are already signed with WCW.
Maybe a little longer, but yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure Scott Steiner was with WCW.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, he'd had, like, a 20-year career at that
Oh,
point.
yeah, I mean, he'd been wrestling much longer. I mean, there's a lot of people who are wrestling a lot more for a lot longer.
Yeah, for a lot less.
For a lot less.
So, yeah, I feel that's like kind of the dream, though, of like being like working for a company where, you know, they have too much money and you have lots of time to kind of, and freedom to kind of do what you want. And I feel like you and I have both been fortunate to be in certain jobs that have given us a little taste of that.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, not even comparable, really, to what Hall and Nash went through, but I do think that is something to aspire to in a way, like, within the world of capitalism, when there is, like, too much money and CEOs and stuff going around and, like, none of it trickles down.
Yeah, I mean, like, in my case, it was working for a local millionaire in a very small town in the middle of England who decided he wanted to do this other, you know, string to his bow that anyone with half a brain could see was doomed to failure. But hey, if you want to pay me to come in 8 hours a day
to sell pensions,
yeah,
and stuff,
that no one wants,
literally just go on Facebook.
Okay, fine. Like, and he literally be looking at me going, "Do you want to go on Facebook?" I'm like, "Yeah, all right. Like, I'll do that."
You're
like,
just like texting me throughout the day. That's what I woke up to.
And that's how both the Attitude Era podcast and this relationship started. Like, was because of that job. Thank you, local millionaire in Lincoln.
But I do feel like the trouble is when you're doing it in something like an industry like professional wrestling, like, people are putting their physical livelihood on the line for this sake. And so I feel if you have a position like that, you have a certain element of responsibility to acknowledge that people are giving up much more than their time to do this. They are giving up the best years of their physique, basically. Yeah,
I think a lot of workers went into Kevin Nash's, like, headspace to kind of convince himself and fans and others that it's like, well, you know, anyone who with sense and a brain would have done what we did. Which is absolutely fine. But I think you were really kidding yourself if you think the only person who really felt it was, like, Eric Bischoff and,
There's a reason Eric Bischoff, like, ended up being, like, best buds with all of them and joined their little gang.
Yeah, or Ted Turner or whatever. Like, the reality is, and I think, you know, something that's definitely happened in the last 5 years, we definitely noticed, you know, from doing this podcast, is certainly, like, people have kind of seen through the bullshit chat that, like, WCW was just a waste of time, and, you know, there was never anything as good as WWE, and, you know, it was just kind of riding the coattails of WWE's success. Like, WWE wanted that narrative to be consumed, and a lot of people, myself included, you know, bought that for many, many years. I think AEW particularly shows that there is a great fondness and reverence and nostalgia for these years and what WCW had. And it just kind of makes me sad that something that a lot of wrestlers and fans held so near and dear to their hearts was kind of really taken advantage of.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's no way you can convince me that they didn't run it into the ground quicker than it. I mean, it was probably going to go under anyway. There were so many problems.
Yes, absolutely.
But, you know, these guys were filling their pockets along the way.
Yeah, and it's like, on the one hand, I can't really blame them, because I do wonder if I was in that position whether or not I'd do the same thing, because if you can, why wouldn't you? Like, we all want to do well in life, and if someone else is, like, you know, throwing money into the trash, like, why wouldn't you want to save it before that happens? But I don't know, it's the politicking, and it's the being out for yourself and your friends, and the not helping anyone else.
He described it as going into a country club with a Shark Tank attitude.
Which is just going to a country club as a country club member.
But, like, the idea that kind of everyone here, like, knows that you can kind of take it a bit easy. And even though he was planning on taking it a bit easier than he would have been in WWF, you know, he was still wrestling quite a lot. You know, he wasn't retired or anything.
Yeah.
But the idea that, like, he was going to do anything it was to ensure that he got the max pay. Like, the creative control that extended to, if Bret Hart's coming in, we have a chat with Nash and Hall and Hogan and make sure they're okay with his pay, because they all get a pay rise, because they all have stipulations in their contract that mean that if someone comes in getting 7 figures, they all get a little sweetener.
Yeah.
And that's like, that's mad. That's fucking mad.
Like, at what point does that not start to sound like a pyramid scheme? It's like Bret Hart's upline is Kevin Nash, and his upline is Hulk Hogan, his upline is Bischoff, and his upline is Turner.
I mean, basically the NWO, this storyline that we come into here, then that is basically the world's greatest pyramid scheme, because you get the 3 lads at the top, you know, who are really getting the fucking money, and then right down at the bottom
they're all saying to the other guys, you can do just as well, you're not too late.
Yeah, even though we're literally calling you guys the NWO B team, you know, like, you guys will, there's a lot of potential here for you to maneuver and all that. I thought it was interesting kind of looking at the kind of the formation of the NWO and looking at the impact of them coming in as like the outsiders into that company again, and just realizing that Bischoff, we talked about on this episode how he was basically straight up lying and saying like, hey, yeah, Vince McMahon's guys are coming to take over the company. And this is hot off the heels of, the curtain call, that very controversial moment where all the members of the clique, when they were saying goodbye to each other, hugged at Madison Square Garden, controversial as that apparently is. But I thought it was interesting to hear them hear chat and shoot interviews from Nash about how Hogan realized that Nash and Hall were like, those are the guys who know what's cool, so I'm going to stick with these guys, brother.
Yeah.
Hogan managing to kind of parlay his stance from being like kind of a cringy early 90s, 80s nostalgia act into being a guy who was in a cool gang, throwing up gang signs. Hogan coming out with, with his bootcut jeans and his
cool
high tops.
Filled in beard that all the kids were rocking back in the day.
What did you like? I mean, just seeing the footage again and all that, and like the idea of this gang coming out, like, what did you think of like Nash's idea of this, having this group coming in and pretending that we're actually going to destroy this company for real?
I love it. It's so good. Genuinely one of the greatest ideas, I think, in the whole of the history of professional wrestling. It's so cool. It's such a good idea.
What's so cool about it? Like, what? I mean, that says a lot that it's, like, we've had in-depth chats about snake oil salesmen involved in this and all that, and you still think it's such a strong angle.
It is, because I think it only works because of kind of who's involved. Because Kevin Nash is genuinely the type of guy who, anyone who went to a school and had any kind of remote affiliation with the cool jock in school who everyone liked.
Is he the cool jock in school who everyone liked? He's the
cool jock in school everyone liked, and he had bad grades, but he had a friend who studied really hard, and so he'd just like copied the answers. And he had the other friend who didn't drink, so he was the designated driver. And he had the other friend who was the party stoner who they could like laugh at and have fun with. So yeah, basically he's a very magnetic presence, and so it makes sense for then, I think heels have always been more cool than baby faces. I don't know if that really is true when you look back at like the 80s and the 90s, but for me as a 90s kid, growing up then in the 2000s, heels have always been the coolest.
Yeah,
in my mind.
He maintains that the length and breadth they went to in the NWO angle. We will do a whole episode in the NWO. That is a plan at some point for sure. But like he maintained that it was what the company needed, was to have this like really hot group, which was full of all these like a ragtag bunch of like outsiders and all that, who just beat everyone up.
I wouldn't say it's outsiders.
No, in fairness, Hulk Hogan, notorious outsider Hulk Hogan.
Eventually Eric Bischoff,
notorious outsider, Disco Inferno. Like come on, like. But the idea though, having all these guys, like you saw this shot where it was the three of them, it was Hogan, Hall, and Nash. Yeah. Just walking around with baseball bats, and you were clapping, going, "That's so cool!" Yeah,
that's really cool. Like,
it says a lot when like some of the people who are on the screen are on the screen, Well,
I know, and it's well known that I do not like Hulk Hogan. I hate Hulk Hogan, but genuinely, NWO, early NWO Hulk Hogan is my favorite era of Hogan. It's the only time I even remotely like him.
Yeah.
He makes a very good heel, probably because he's a piece of shit, and that really does help.
But it says a lot about Nash that like. Nash, together with Hall, these were like the people who were in Hogan's ear and saying, you need to turn heel, you need to do this, and Hogan didn't want anything to do with this. And like, I think there's great skill, and it's a sign of true intelligence and management of people, and that maybe some experience that he had, is you're able to present an amazing idea to someone, but make them think it's their idea. And they initially think the idea is terrible, and not only do you manage to convince them it's a great idea, you go all the way around and they're like, hang on a second, what if I turned heel and joined this outsider group, this New World organization, if you will?
I think the way they managed it though, isn't it? It's because it's Hall and Nash, they did it first, and they were kind of like making out as though they were sent from the WWE to like infiltrate WCW.
But before an actual cease and desist, by the way.
Yeah.
Where apparently there is some segment where they literally had to say plainly to camera, we are not affiliated with Vincent McMahon's World Wrestling Federation or Titan Sports Incorporated.
Yeah,
or whatever.
But by that point it was too late and they were already really cool. But I think it was the look of these two massive, very handsome, like probably the two most handsome guys in the industry at that point.
Oh yeah, and can I point out as well, Nash with the non-boot polish hair.
Yeah.
Fuck off with that diesel oil in your hair.
No, long flowing blonde golden locks.
My God.
Standing next to Scott Hall with the jet black hair and the stubble. Like, they look so iconic together. They look really cool. And the NWO t-shirt is very cool as well.
And
like
they speak so effortlessly as well.
And they have great charisma with each other. They seem to be genuinely best of friends and genuinely having fun. You just want to like share a beer with them. So to me, it's obvious that like that's how they got Hogan to join them. It's just like, look how much fun we're having. Look how cool we are.
Look how with it we are.
Everyone loves us. Don't you want this?
And I find as well, I keep hearing these random moments. And, something that was cool in the 90s. Like, I thought DX was the coolest thing in the world in 1999, as a kid. That's why at age 12 I wore a hockey top that said "Suck It" and the number 69 on the back.
Aww.
Good idea there, Kevin.
How did you explain that to your parents?
I honestly don't know. I think they didn't know. Like, I think we were.
Really?
I think we were lucky enough that 69 hadn't penetrated my parents' generation.
Wow.
I could be very fucking naive right now saying that. Like, all sorts going on in Ireland, like, But NWO, like, that was something that I heard was cool in the 90s. And I didn't watch WCW in the 90s. So I was always kind of looking back retrospectively. And it always strikes me as like, wow, every time I go back and I watch DX stuff, it's like a new thing that makes me cringe and go, oh my fucking God. Yeah,
because you're not
so uncool.
8 years old.
But I see these random things from the NWO. And there's a lot of cringe stuff with the NWO. But particularly the stuff with Hall and Nash and stuff like that. We watch these random bits. I'm like, that's so fucking cool.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, it goes against everything I think should be right or wrong in wrestling. I'm like, that's so fucking cool. Like, there's that famous video of like Kevin Nash was meant to be in a match with the Giant, a young Big Show Paul White, and in the match, for whatever reason, they attempt to do the jackknife powerbomb, and he lands right in his fucking head. That was like one of the early botch clips that went around on E-Bomb's World. Like, look at him, he tried to powerbomb Big Show and he nearly killed the guy. And we watched this compilation of funny Kevin Nash NWO promos, and he's like, people are asking me, what my reaction was seeing the Giant dropped on his head like that, and he just starts laughing his head. He's like, and they like replay it over and over again with like banana peel sound effect, weep boom, and like all of those black and white NWO promos, like they're obviously very cool, but it just suits Nash particularly to a T.
It does. Yeah,
him and Scott Hall in black and white standing on the ring apron, pretending to wrestle jobbers so they don't have to show up for a show the day after. You fuckers, that's so cool. Or like them just finding a big crate of NWO shirts in the back and they just take them out into the car park and they just sell them to the fans like in 5 minutes. Like, goddamn, that's they went into the mainstream with this thing. I think the very rare that wrestlers actually like had that finger on the pulse. Nash knew it and he knew how to market it, like, there's a reason why Kylie Jenner wore an NWO Wolfpack t-shirt at one point. It's trickle-down coolness from Kevin Nash, folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it is. Nash, of course, like many people in the world of wrestling, who's viewed as being charismatic, intelligent, and a bit of a politicker, and knows how to kind of work his way around the backstage environment, ends up becoming head of the creative committee in WCW. Now, we heard so many, I would say, conflicting things about this.
Yeah.
What's your understanding about Kevin Nash's role and his enjoyment of his time as head of creative in World Championship Wrestling?
I mean, before this episode, kind of the only thing I knew about it was that he was generally blamed as being the person who destroyed WCW directly because of his booking.
And it's so not fair when, like, I don't think booking could kill an entire company.
No.
And he's probably number 3 on the list of bad bookers that they actually had, but anyway.
So, and I know he takes massive issue with being blamed for that, and rightly so, because it's not just his fault, it's lots of people are to blame. So, I mean, I knew it was a controversial booking run, but then I knew that anyone who had any element of, like, booking control or creative control in WCW at that time, similarly, was regarded as being bad and destroying the business.
I mean, it's a poison chalice.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's been pissed in already, and then you just, like, fill it up with more piss.
Wait, you poisoned the piss? You didn't need to. It's already... Oh, why did I drink the piss? It is interesting to hear him... Kayfabe Commentaries, a group used to do these kind of guest booker shows. We watched a little bit of one of Nash's one where he's talking about essentially the impossible task of specifically booking in WCW because they taped a 2-hour show after they did a 3-hour live show. So you basically had to do the 5-hour show altogether.
Yeah.
But because of the way that the shows ran, they had to plan next week's show as well, which also meant you had to plan next week's other show. So every time they sat down to write a TV show, they had to write 4 TV shows.
Yeah.
And they had to write 10 hours of television.
Yeah, and then if someone got, like, injured in a match, they'd have to start all over again.
Or the more likely thing, one of maybe the dozens you've given it to now, might go, oh, I've got creative control. I wonder if creative control is one of those things where it's like, oh, I never think to use it.
Yeah.
I probably think that most people had it would think to use it. And then they go on the day of, actually, I don't want to do this, which means 9 of your 10 hours are now fucking crap. So, the big charge that's labelled against him, and it's the match we're going to look at now, is that he booked himself into a world title program with Bill Goldberg. And Bill Goldberg, who's a year into his career in WCW, he's 170-0 or whatever it is. He's the world heavyweight champion, and it's the main event of Starrcade. Kevin Nash is going to be taking on Bill Goldberg, and I shudder to think, given your stance on Goldberg, what your thoughts were going to be about this match. Were you dreading it when we went into it?
No, not especially.
Why is that? Do you think that these two would somehow gel, or?
No, I tried to come in with open mind, you know.
Oh, I like that.
A benefit of a Goldberg match is they are often very short.
That's true. And he can surprise you.
He can surprise me. I don't hate Goldberg.
Yeah, okay.
Modern Goldberg I haven't got much time for, but classic Goldberg, I don't mind him.
You might have been a classic Goldberg.
Yeah.
So here we are, Starrcade 1999, as the head of the WCW booking committee, Kevin Nash, takes on Bill Goldberg for the WCW Championship. Starrcade is basically their version of WrestleMania, in case I haven't told you that before. So this is like the main event of the biggest show of the year, basically. We had some confusion about whether Nash was actually involved with the creative committee at this point.
Yes, because I can't remember which videos we watched. Was it Goldberg we watched a shoot interview with?
There was an interview with Goldberg where he's like, guy just booked himself to beat me.
Yeah, a few different people basically said that Kevin Nash booked this feud, this match specifically. But in several different interviews, Kevin Nash insisted that he didn't. He hadn't been signed as a booking agent or whatever you call them until February after the December that this match took place.
Yeah, because he says, I've got my pay stub, because this is what I love, right? So many times in wrestling, if someone was asked, like, hey, creative meeting's coming up, do you want to pitch in some ideas? Most wrestlers would probably jump at the opportunity.
Yeah.
Kevin Nash, he asked for a new contract.
Right.
$500,000 a year. On top of his performer's contract for his booking committee head contract.
Okay, yeah.
And what it came down to, even though he said that his first pay stub is from February, and this match is in like late November, so it can't have been him, but apparently in early November, Bischoff decided to give all booking responsibility to this new committee, which was in a informal capacity headed up by Kevin Nash, which also included Dusty Rhodes, Terry Taylor, a couple of other names, a couple of other wrestlers. I think Disco Inferno was in there and stuff like that as well. And apparently, I think Kevin Sullivan on that committee, he suggested that they do like a crazy angle on Nitro where Nash beats Goldberg for the title.
Right.
You know, to kind of get some interest going.
On Nitro.
So on Nitro.
That wouldn't have broken Goldberg's streak, is that correct?
I know, it would have still broken his streak.
Okay, right.
It just wouldn't have happened on pay-per-view.
Right.
And then apparently Nash was like, did we learn nothing about when we had Goldberg beat Hogan for the title? You get one big rating and then nothing will come from it. And then he proposes this big storyline involving him and the NWO kind of reuniting because they had split up into these two different groups. Nash had the Wolfpack and Hogan had the Hollywood group. And he had this big plan set up in motion. But apparently it wasn't until the very end of that year and the start of next year where Bischoff literally took that, he took that sabbatical and he's like, I'm gone now, bye.
Right.
And then Nash was formally in charge. But the idea to beat Goldberg and take the belt off of him, that was already decided.
Okay.
By committee.
Right.
Which he was...
head of.
Well, he wasn't head of, Joe, but he sat at the front of the table and he would open the meetings.
Right.
But is that the head of a meeting? I mean, I don't know about you. Most meetings I go to, anyone could start it, like, you know. He ain't taking minutes. He's the head of the meeting. Like, he clearly did. He was involved in this.
Yeah.
You know, it's just... But, like, we had to go through fucking backflips through lasers to try and actually get to the bottom of this because he said so many different things about it.
Yeah, and regardless, every time he was insistent that he was not head of booking at the time.
Yeah, but he kind of was.
Right.
You know, just so we know, he had a hand in this, is what I'm saying.
Right, okay.
You know, it's not as if he was against the idea of him going up against Goldberg in the main event. We have our video package to set us up for the WCW main event.
So weird.
You know, and you thought you had problems with AEW, But at least they'd have Jim Ross show up, or Jim Ross wearing a different top show up and talk about how these guys are going to have a match, I guess. But this set new lows.
This was just clips of Kevin Nash and Goldberg.
Yeah.
Set to choir music.
And they were in black and white as well.
They were in blue and white.
Blue and white.
Because they were surrounded by clouds.
Yeah.
And there was no dialogue. Not a single word of dialogue to give context to this match or feud. Well, I don't really know what the storyline is for
think the story's literally like Kevin Nash, head of the Wolfpack. He's the main event. He's challenging for the title.
Okay.
And he's never won the world title before in WCW at this point, Nash.
Right.
You know, a couple of years into his run. And I would say, like, even though, like, the NWO thing, like, you know, it got less popular. It got way too big. It got fucking ridiculous. When you've got, like, a faction and then it splits into two factions and they feud with themselves.
Right.
You know, but the Wolfpack was still very popular. So, you know, it made sense. He was a very popular guy. This was kind of face versus face, but the Wolfpack were kind of bad guys who acted cool, so they were kind of popular. You know, honestly, it's fucking confusing. Yeah. You know, it's bad when he says the main event of WCW NWO Starrcade. What? Like, who? What? I do like Michael Buffer saying, WCW Board of Directors and the Washington, D.C. Boxing Commission have sanctioned this match. Don't know why. It makes it feel big and real.
Yeah.
You know, there has to be paperwork had to be filed out for this one. What do you think of this iteration of Kevin Nash with the cool Wolfpack music? He's got the big blonde hair. He's got the fucking tassels. A lot of fireworks. What do you think of Big Daddy Cool here?
I think this might be peak Nash.
I'm inclined to agree.
He's got a mane. He looks amazing.
Fucking hair, man.
Looks so cool.
The kind of stubble.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, not really shaved.
Yeah.
But he probably has to get it to be that exact length. I think there's a lot more effort into his look than he's kind of putting on here.
Yeah, I think so, because you were asking me, you were like, how come Kevin Nash's hair seems so special and unique compared to,
and they're like rubbing my hands to my hair. Why is his hair so shiny?
Because like, you were like, yeah, because there's no one else with hair like him. I was like, yeah, there is. There's like Chris Jericho and Triple H and Test and all of these other guys. Like, there's loads of guys with long blonde hair, but Kevin Nash is the only one, as far as I can tell, who seems to, like, you know, his hair is smooth and shiny. It's not frizzy when he wrestles. He hasn't got loads of conditioner in it. It's not greasy. I think he has highlights as well, because his hair isn't naturally blonde.
It's not fluffy, though, you know? No? It looks a little slept in, almost.
A little bit, yeah.
That's what makes him cool.
Yeah.
Oh, god damn it. You know what? It took me a long time, like, because I hated him so much during my teen years, my early 20s. I'd roll my eyes every time I saw him, but, like, let me tell you right now, that's one cool fucking customer right there.
He is very cool.
And Kevin Nash seems so much cooler than Goldberg here.
Yeah. Goldberg seems like a nervous little boy.
Yeah, in his entrance they had Goldberg do he signed a shirt for a kid.
Yeah, just backstage, some random kid.
Headbutt a locker, mate.
Yeah,
come on, let's
punch
get
a
into
limo
it,
at
like.
least.
This match is announced as being no disqualification. And Goldberg has got a lot of fans in the audience because we see one of the weirdest signs that I've ever seen from a wrestling fan. It was a special tongue egg sign.
Oh, the tongue egg. That's a good little Goldberg egg.
If you want to see what Goldberg would look like as like a go-go, that's what it looks like right there, folks. I counted the number of bumps in this match, Joe. I've got a tally here for Big Sexy.
Yeah.
I've got a tally here for Goldberg.
Okay.
20-minute main event, minus entrances, and a lot of posturing. What's your guess for... Let's go with Goldberg first. How many bumps do you think Goldberg took in this match? And by the way, a bump isn't dropping to one knee or sitting onto your bum. A bump is literally when like your back makes full contact with the mat from a standing or near standing position. That's my rule.
Okay, sorry, for Goldberg.
For Goldberg, how many times do you think Goldberg left his feet and landed on his back?
It feels like he left his feet less than Nash did.
You're right. Yeah, you're right. He did.
I'm gonna say 5 times.
3 times for Big Match Bill Goldberg.
My God.
Big Daddy Cool, Big Sexy. What do you reckon?
7.
Yes, exactly.
Really?
Yes, 7.
Wow.
7 bumps. And you know what? I was genuinely surprised.
Yeah, I thought it would be like 3.
and I found myself at the end of this match then being like, Oh, well, fair play from Kevin Nash. I didn't think I'd be having to get into the second column for my tally here. And I found myself then enjoying this match because I had set my standards in my mind so low that I thought in the main event of a WrestleMania caliber show for the world title, with the biggest streak in wrestling on the line, I thought the man would do less than 7 bumps.
That's good though, so in total we got a grand total of 10 bumps.
Yeah, not so bad.
Is
double digits.
How mathematically it's a 20-minute match, so it's
1 every 2 minutes.
Oh,
Joe.
1 every 2 minutes, sorry.
And that's including entrances.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a lower amount than you would probably expect for that. But it's as you would expect, there's posturing early on. I was wondering what your thoughts were about the idea of a match where Kevin Nash is like the general, the guy in charge, leading the young guy Goldberg through it. Goldberg maintains that, or at points I should say, maintains that Nash gave him loads of bad advice and was like trying to destroy his career.
Oh, right.
I don't know, like Nash, he maintains that he's the reason why Goldberg got $1 million contract. So I don't know, but like, did it seem like Kevin Nash was the man in charge here? No,
no, not at all. Not at all. I actually don't have any notes in this match for anything that Kevin Nash does.
Joe, he busted out a cross arm breaker at one point. He did a move.
Goldberg stops to sign the boy's shirt. Silly Goldberg face Trollberg.
Goblinberg, you mean? When he went...
I prefer Trollberg.
Trollberg is good, yeah.
Big spit into the hand.
Oh, that was it. He did the big spear. He speared Nash.
Yeah.
And he fucking, Jesus Christ, and he fucking ran right through him.
Spear, yeah.
And then he spat in the ground.
And then he spat in his hand. And then he touched Kevin Nash.
What the fuck? That's disrespectful right there.
And then Goldberg does a spin kick.
That was very cool. Yeah, I like that.
And then Scott Hall comes out dressed as event staff, but you can't tell it's Scott Hall because you can't see his face. And you can only tell it's him because on commentary they go, "That's Scott Hall."
You were completely blown away.
I didn't believe it was him.
We had Bam Bam and Disco coming out running interference, and it's so fucking ridiculous that, like, literally the match gets into second gear and really gets going once other people come out to take bumps for these lads. And you actually didn't even recognize, Scott at all. You were like, Joe went, "An event staff, it's just a tactical like, literally the ideal WCW fan. What's going on, Tony Schiavone?" Taser Timon in the house here. Yeah, he zapped him.
Yeah, he's got a proper taser.
I thought that actually, in terms of a taser spot in wrestling,
that was really good.
The noise of it, and the way Goldberg sold it,
was really
and the way
good.
Razor was like, yes!
Yeah.
It worked really well.
Really good.
Then we got a jackknife, a big fucking floaty jackknife where Goldberg really spins around 180 degrees and lands right back on his feet. And we go to 173-1. Kevin Nash ends Goldberg's streak. Controversial fashion. And Nash will always be the first person to point out he never once said, "I beat Goldberg's streak," or never made a deal about it, or never said, "I'm the man who ended Goldberg's streak," which I don't think is much as a badge of honor as in, like, why wouldn't you? Like, if someone ends Goldberg's streak, shouldn't that be, like, a big thing?
Yeah, like, I know that Brock Lesnar ended The Undertaker's streak.
Yeah, because Paul Heyman never fucking shut up about it.
Yeah. Why? What's the point of doing it if you're not going to brag about it? Why would you do it then?
I don't... Well, there is a confusing tale as to why they did what they did, and we'll see if we can make sense of it and see if it's all very easily explained, as Nash maintains. Want to know your thoughts on this main event, though. You didn't have much in the way of notes in terms of the action, but how did it strike you? Were you engaged with it? It was a main event of a big show, probably the biggest show of the year for them.
Hate this. If I had stayed up to watch this show, I'd be so angry.
Why did you hate it?
It was really boring. It was rubbish. It was crap. There was no proper wrestling, no bumps.
Did you get the sense that they were like... Because, I mean, there is that great skill where it's like, we're doing fuck all, and the people are going, whoa!
Yeah, nah, the crowd are dead. No one gives a shit.
Like, the crowd knew.
There's no character work either.
Yeah.
Like, who is this for? It doesn't even seem like Nash and Goldberg are having fun. Like, Goldberg seems nervous, and Nash seems bored.
That's not a good vibe for your main event.
It's a main event.
So, I dare ask, what did you give the rating for it then?
I gave it 1 star.
1 star.
It should fucking count itself lucky that I gave it 1.
Is this a damning indictment of Kevin Nash, the performer?
If this is his example of being a ring general, absolutely. This is terrible.
I will say, like, it's me here now who's got this fucking rock bottom expectation, and it's like, well, Nash, he took a power slam, he did a cross arm breaker, He did like a couple of moves.
Wow. A professional wrestler?
And
really?
there was a part where Goldberg grabbed his leg and he pushed him on the ground.
Wow.
He went down. That had never happened before as well. So my standard was so fucking low.
Yeah.
But I think that's my standard is only low because I have like a lifetime of viewing him a certain way, which I don't think I would have had if I was watching that show live. I would have expected a main event. I kind of got vibes from, remember when we did Sandman, him and Carlito had that match?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
that was entertaining at least because they were having fun.
Yeah, there was actually a camaraderie there.
And
of
the audience as well were like, hey, these lads.
This is shit.
Yeah.
Way. Whereas it felt like Goldberg was like having a panic attack in this match. And Nash was like leaving his body by all means necessary. So, where this went to, and the reason why they did this, was the next night, the only reason why they did this was the next night Goldberg, it's announced to Nash that, hey, you only won because of interference. And Nash was like, what? I didn't know this. Oh, I need to prove myself I'm a real man.
So he didn't know that Scott Hall interfered?
He pretended he didn't know.
What, did he not see Bam Bam Bigelow?
He didn't realize that they were trying to interfere on his behalf. He didn't realize that it was Scott Hall. He didn't see it, you see. He said he didn't know, and he wanted to challenge Goldberg to a rematch because he didn't want to win the belt in a dirty way.
Okay.
But then, in all their wisdom, WCW, with the top babyface who'd just been scorned the night before, they decided to do an angle where Goldberg gets arrested for stalking Miss Elizabeth. And then Kevin Nash is like, Hulk Hogan, you NWO Hollywood son of a bitch, I know that you just made that up to get Goldberg to be sent to prison to deny the fans the match they want to see. So tonight it's going to be Wolfpack versus Hollywood as I defend the world title against you, Hulk Hogan, and I'm going to beat your ass. And then what happens was they came out and Hogan finger poked him and then just pinned him 1, 2, 3 and won the belt. And then the NWO reformed into a big super group. And then a couple of weeks later, Bill Goldberg got upset and punched a limo. So the big angle they had just kind of ended.
Why did he get upset?
Because they told him to punch a limo and he thought he could do it. Oh, that was them. We talked about in the Goldberg episode. It was, they told him to put the special gimmick in his hand.
Right.
And he got upset about it. And then was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I can punch the window myself. And that's where, he lacerated all of his arm.
Yeah, broke his arm.
And that was it then. The whole angle was for Nash.
To be fair, I feel the moment that you turn the storyline into Goldberg as a stalker of the most beloved woman in wrestling, you've probably already dug that grave.
Hasn't she fucking suffered enough, like, the indignity of that?
But, that's real fucking harsh for Goldberg as
yeah.
well. Like, is he not supposed to be a face
he
at
is.
this point? And, like, she is the most... Miss Elizabeth is genuinely... Like, people who haven't listened to our Macho Man episode, I cannot emphasize enough, she's the Princess Diana of professional wrestling. She has never been heel. She is always, always beloved by everyone.
Like, she was, with Randy when he was in the NWO, but it was still Miss Elizabeth.
Yeah, she was still a good person.
But again, like, whose fucking great idea was that? Well, you were sitting at the head of the table that decided, let's do this.
Yeah, that's a really weird thing to be like, I'm going to book to end your streak, and also... to add insult to injury, we've decided you're a stalker now.
Yeah.
You decided you're a sex pest, Goldberg. That's why he looked like he was having a panic attack. He knew it was coming. He knew that the Miss Elizabeth fans would be out to get his blood.
Does that make you feel a bit more sorry or a little more empathetic towards Goldberg now, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. Especially seeing as, like, he was given a unique situation with his career in that he was, like, kind of chosen to be the chosen one.
Yeah.
And he was, like, kind of told, you're the king of this company now and you're special and no one will ever be better than you. And then he's, like, kind of given an easy ride. And then this happens.
Yeah.
That's like playing in the kiddies pool for your entire life and then being pushed into the open sea with sharks.
And, like, the thing about it with regards to Nash, I always viewed it as, like, I was always perplexed. I was like, if you were the booker or whatever, even if you weren't the booker and you got to end Goldberg's streak and win the world title, he'd never won the world title in WCW at that point. And at the main event with their biggest show of the year, wouldn't you want, like, a nice long run with that belt to be on top and be, like, the big superstar, make the big paychecks, or, like, get even more merch money or anything like that? I was always like, why would you agree, or why would you propose as a creative person to be like, hey, I should lose the belt to Hogan straight away?
Yeah.
And, like, it just kind of dawned on me, like, in later years, it was like, he doesn't give a shit.
No.
Like, for someone like a Bret Hart, or on the other kind of end of the experience spectrum for a Goldberg, the world title, it means everything. It means a lot. Nash doesn't give a shit. He's getting $500,000 a year to write this fucking shit, as well as the couple million he's getting to bring out the old 7-bump performances.
Nash is like me in that he doesn't understand or care about the value of title belts. But unlike me, he is a professional wrestler.
Yeah, but you would at least want the belt to hold up your pants, so you'd appreciate it as a piece of kit at least, right? You know? So Nash finds himself, throughout 1999, kind of bearing the brunt as being the head of this creative team. Of there's injuries, there's people who are gone, like Scott's gone, you've got injuries from Lex Luger, Hogan gets an injury, there's lots of people who are on the outs. And we were watching this shoot interview with him talking about how hard it was, to book, and we were getting kind of sympathetic with him. And he's like, there came a time where the only guy I had who could go out there, and be a character on TV was Ric Flair. And that's why I put him in that storyline where he's in the insane asylum. And we're like, what?
Wow.
You motherfucker, So, yeah, he does end up being removed from the creative committee. Not before appearing on WCW Thunder and doing very passive-aggressive commentary where he's like, paying me too much money for this. To say he became across as a bit unprofessional is, towards the end of his run in WCW. Yeah.
Can you imagine if a woman did anything like that?
Fuck off.
Can you, literally imagine even one tiny minute of an instance of Kevin Nash's career done by a woman?
The closest we've gotten to a Kevin Nash career moment for a woman is Gail Kim eliminating herself.
Exactly.
And she was fucking blacklisted.
She was, yeah.
And Nash was literally on TBS going, the fucking executives need to make back some of their money, brother, because they just wasted $500,000 on me.
Yeah. And everyone's like, fucking legend.
We
love him.
Yeah. I didn't know if it came as much of a surprise that when WCW went under, Nash was one of the guys who had the guaranteed money. Unlike DDP, he didn't take a risk and go back to Vince. He just healed up for the year. He got a couple $1 million out of it. Again, reaping the benefits of the position that he found himself in.
Yeah, and that's the perfect thing for someone like him as well, because obviously if you do love wrestling and that's why you do it is for the wrestling, the joy of wrestling rather than the paycheck, then absolutely, yeah. It's good that people like Kevin Nash sat down and just took the money.
Yeah.
You don't need to be wrestling right now. You don't want to be wrestling right now. I don't think people want you to be wrestling right now either.
I think a lot of people are going to probably view what we're saying as being we're chastising the character of the man and all that stuff. But I
think he'd say it himself. It was his decision.
His Hall of Fame speech, he said, people wanted to know if I just did it for the money. And the answer is yes. He's like, yeah, I mean,
okay.
He's allowed to.
Yeah.
That's fine.
It's a job.
It is kind of it is interesting, though, to kind of see that you can only have that attitude. I think it can only get you so far, though. Because, when it comes time, in 2002 to bringing back, himself and Hogan and Nash into the fold, he said that apparently they did, a vote amongst the wrestlers and the staff. It was like, who wants them back? And it was literally 95% didn't want them back.
Because he's a horrid bully.
And, you can just imagine, this is 2002, Joe. This is before all the shoots have come out, before all the tell-all books have come out.
Yeah.
This is just kind of based on what people already just kind of know. And there's a lot that people didn't know back then. That says a lot. The guy had a fucking toxic reputation at that point.
Yeah.
He finds his way back into WWE, but it is unfortunately not a very successful tenure. The NWO revamp in 2002, much like the ECW revamp, was very much a case in point of Vince McMahon not knowing the toy that he coveted from the kid across the street. He didn't know how it worked, so he broke it and then blamed it on his parents for not working and got a new thing instead. Nash's knee injuries.
Oh.
This is something we probably need to talk about because it really kind of came to the forefront here. And this is when I first was introduced to Kevin Nash, really, was around this time. And it was a good joke with me and my friends who watched wrestling. This guy, he had 12 knee surgeries or whatever it was. Ha ha ha. He's going to injure his knee. He can't wrestle because his knees are going to get hurt. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Here, going lumbering around. Click click click. He's gonna break his knee again. And that wasn't aided by the fact that he was literally off wrestling for 9 months, and then he's like, I'm going to wrestle tonight. And I showed Joe the footage. I was embarrassed to do so. Hot tag to Big Sexy. Here he comes. Ah! And he's just right down. I'm like,
there's no one I would rather that happen to than Kevin Nash. I'm glad it happened
Joe!
to him. I'm sorry, I am.
Are you saying that with the benefit of hindsight, knowing that he's okay now?
Yes,
or,
obviously.
Yeah, okay, all right.
But like, look.
I wouldn't think you'd wish that on...
No, I don't say I wish it on him. I don't wish it on anyone. But I don't think there's a better person it could have happened to.
Right.
Because it's so humiliating.
It is humbling, isn't it?
If you love professional wrestling and you identify as, I am a professional wrestling fan and I'm a professional wrestler and I am a master of my craft and I work 12 hours a day to do this as my job and I love it, and then that happens to you in the middle of a match, that's awful. But he doesn't give a shit. Okay, he's still going to get paid. It's really painful and it is slightly embarrassing, but we all know Kevin Nash can make fun of himself, so he doesn't care about that respect, and he gets paid for time off. He's probably happy for it.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean when I say,
right,
there's no one else I would rather it happen to.
Yeah, because I don't think Kevin Nash would have been down at tracks or whatever, busting his ass to come back, you know.
Or like Seth Rollins' WrestleMania documentary, like...
Yeah, like, literally, I'm going to cry myself into fucking a state, and I'm going to work out so much and rehab so much, I'm going to come back in half the time. Nash is like, how long are you giving me? You know, I'll be back then. And, you know, he still had his, you know, he had his big match with Triple H or whatever. But, like, for me, like, as a kid, I had a Kevin Nash action figure, you know, when I was, like, you know, 13 or 14 or whatever it was. And, like, there was a part of me that thought, like, you know, the part of him that I loved was he just looked cool. And, you know, he did have that air about him. But, like, as a wrestler, I thought, like, this was someone who didn't really care about quality of wrestling as a kid. I just thought he was boring when I watched him wrestle.
Yeah.
I remember they had him and Triple H in a Hell in a Cell match, and I remember like thinking, I'm not going to be a wrestling fan anymore because they've given me a Hell in a Cell match, and it was so bad.
Well, he is a boring wrestler. Like, he moves like an old man. And, you know, I'm not saying that's like a uniquely Kevin Nash problem. Like, I think that's an issue with his size. Any big wrestler moves like they're older than they are.
But you saw, remember it was a couple of years back where he finally had the full knee replacement with stem cell therapy. The man was damn near crippled for his entire career.
Yeah.
Like, his legs were, like, whatever bending the wrong way, like, this is bending on the wrong axis.
Yeah, you can see early on in his career, his legs bend in a way that they shouldn't.
Yeah, and he's it's not as if, like, oh, we watched some 95 Nash and he was fucking moving around. No, he had that injury, like, way back in his basketball days.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, I mean, it's honestly a miracle that he got through his wrestling career in many respects, because he had so many of those knee scopes and those little surgeries just to get him, you know, kind of put back together again.
And if he had wrestled like the style that maybe was expected of him, he wouldn't have had the long career that he had.
That's
he
true.
Definitely would have. He would either have burned out because he didn't love wrestling enough to keep doing it that long with that amount of energy, or he'd have injured himself in a career-ending way and he wouldn't have been able to earn money, and that wouldn't have been his goal then.
And I think, you know, you got to view the mindset as well of Nash at this point. Even if his moveset and his style hasn't, you know, changed much, or if he's not necessarily slower or anything like that. But, like, you know, he spent several years with Hogan, you know, in his ear, and, you know, this is where he really learns that, yeah, you don't need to, you can phone it in. You know, you don't need to do 120 miles an hour all the time. And, you know, his time in WWE kind of went out with a bit of a fizzle, because I think there was a lot of us who were watching at the time assumed that he would become, like, a big star around that time, and it just didn't happen. But it didn't feel like he didn't become a big star because Vince didn't want him or he got buried. It just felt like, oh, he got injured when the time was wrong, and that was it. They didn't want him anymore.
Yeah. And
then he goes over to TNA, which was a company that I was watching very religiously back in those days. And their big pay-per-view, their big pay-per-view, Bound for Glory, which is like their WrestleMania. And Kevin Nash is coming in. They've just gotten on cable TV. They're going to be seen in more homes than ever before. And Kevin Nash is going to be in the main event against Jeff Jarrett. He's going to take the belt off him. Nash injured his knee right before the event. And this was me kind of officially going, fuck you then. Like, I was betrayed as a fan by this guy getting injured. And, like, that's no way to view a wrestler. But what came next is something that I or no one could have foreseen, which were the now infamous and genuinely some of the greatest stuff I've ever watched in professional wrestling, and some of the most that you and I have ever laughed together at wrestling, are the many Dr. Nash / paparazzi production segments with Alex Shelley, Chris Sabin, Jay Lethal, Sanjay Dutt, Kurt Angle, etc. Talk me through Dr. Nash and how he found himself in this kind of post-main event world.
Well, I feel like I haven't seen Dr. Nash, really, because all the clips we saw were mostly of Kurt Angle just talking at him, and you actually don't get to see Nash really at all.
Yeah.
So the main examples I think I saw were more of the paparazzi production stuff, and it was basically just him. So yeah, it's just like a series of like little silly skits. It's like the type of thing that you might see on AEW's like
being the elite,
yeah, that type of
You're
stuff.
being generous.
I am being generous. That's what being the elite aspire to be this.
You heard it here now, that's it.
But basically they're these kind of like short skits where Kevin Nash would talk about like his run in WCW or his run in WWE, and he'd say like, oh, I was the biggest draw ever in WWE's history, or I earned the company the most amount of record-breaking money.
What I love is like, when I took the strap off Backlund, 50,000 in the Garden that night, and Alex Shelley goes, I thought the Garden only holds 22,000. And I was like, well, hell, 50,000 that night, let me tell you. And you know what it really was? Because it's 2004. I think he was looking at the likes of like extras.
Do you think?
Where you had people like, Ben Stiller and stuff like that playing these kind of exaggerated versions of themselves where it's like, oh, this is what you know about me because of what you've heard. I'm going to ham it up and play into it. And like him with his fucking graph implying that he made more money than Stone Cold Steve Austin.
So good.
You got to go a little aberration here for Rocky, obviously. But, you look at my money, it's obviously quite a bit. Anyway, he's done himself his little marker.
Yeah.
And the idea is that he's kind of, he tried to come into the main event and he got injured, and then he's reappeared and he's talking to these X Division guys, and they're all young. And X Division is meant to be these kind of young high flyers.
Yeah, and he's like, I want you to teach me how to be like one of you guys. Like,
because I reckon I could do this X Division shit easily with my eyes closed.
Yeah, and they're like, yeah, no worries, brother. We've got your back. We'll teach you. We'll show you the ropes and everything.
And this is playing off as well. I don't know if I mentioned it, but like Nash, particularly when he was head of creative in WCW, was notorious for overlooking the smaller technical guys, the likes of Benoit and Jericho and all that, because the term that he used apparently was vanilla midget.
Oh, right.
Which is, again, they're dime a dozen. It's never anyone's favorite, and they're little, so they're no good.
Okay.
So, X Division is like, we're going to throw that on its head. So the idea of this guy coming into the X Division, it's like, how dare you,
It was great though, because you have these bits of like them being like, right, Kevin, so what we want you to do is like you bend over here and you grab your opponent by the shoulders and the back, and then you kind of like reverse splash 450 off the top rope.
Yeah, it's a reverse plancha, Kev. It's pretty simple.
And he's like, right, yeah, I think I got it, like this.
No,
Kevin,
him, like.
not quite, Kevin. That was just a punch. Here we go. Let's do it again. You do it to me this time. Right, okay, got it. No, Kevin, that's just a punch again. Oh, I see. There's something we're not quite getting here.
I just love it. He would do all these things where he'd take these like random X Division guys and he'd like give them like a psychology test, and then he'd like assign them new gimmicks and stuff like that. And like we got like. This is like where you started to see people like, remember in our Macho Man episode, we talked about how Jay Lethal started doing the impressions and all of that. It was through the paparazzi production skits where it happened. And like, it was funny. I thought it was a great piece of business because it made me appreciate Kevin Nash in this whole new way.
Yeah.
He was the last person in the world that I thought, because I never thought in my million years that any wrestler would like not take themselves seriously. Particularly one who people make fun of.
Yeah.
For being lazy. Like I remember when I first met Adam Bigelow, and he would draw these little wrestling caricatures, and he'd say, name a wrestler, and I'd draw him. And I was like, draw Kevin Nash. And he drew Kevin Nash with like his eyes half open with a t-shirt that said BLB, Big Lazy Bastard. And like it literally was a point where if I was ever feeling a little bit down, I'd be like, Adam, show me Nash there. And he'd just go through his sketchbook and I'd be like, and like a lot of it is because like, Nash kind of poked fun at himself.
Yeah.
And like not many wrestlers, and we talk about like, Brett and Sean and all that, and I think they don't take themselves as seriously now. There's a difference between not taking yourself seriously and actually like parodying yourself about the things that people like hate about you.
Yeah, because I feel like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart are aware of what people make fun of them for, but they would never make fun of themselves for it. Whereas Kevin Nash is very well aware of what people make fun of him for, and joins in on it because he realizes that's the best way to get people to like think you're funny, is to just go along with it.
Well, my favorite part of the angle, I know it's kind of shit because it was building to him taking on the X Division champion Chris Sabin. I thought like, oh man, imagine if he won the belt, you've got big sexy Kevin Nash with these fucking 4 moves, is going to be like the X Division champion. This is the division that gave us AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, that triple threat match that we watched that we raved about with Christopher Daniels. It's like, it felt like sacrilege. And then it came to the event and Nash, I never knew if it was real or not, but he showed up in a wheelchair and he's like, yeah, I hurt myself. I can't, Alex, you gotta go do it for Paparazzi Productions.
Not just in a wheelchair though, but with like a neck
brace.
Like
literally like, fucking, if he came in with a Star Trek gimmick with the beep and dot on it, like, you know. And we watched him on Stone Cold Sessions, and Austin was like, tell me about your run there in TNA. What was it like working for, Dixie Carter down there in Nashville, down there in the Impact Studios in Florida? And he's like, man, I was like a 40-minute drive from my house. I'd do TV. I'd go across the road to the Ramada, and I'd eat 2 cheeseburgers. It was the best time of my life. And he honestly, he phoned it in. He wrestled plenty, but he wrestled the exact thing that he could do, and that was all people kind of expected of him.
Yeah.
You get, here and there some kind of like, oh, okay, that match was a little bit more than something, but he was mostly tag stuff, or, he was involved in groups like the Main Event Mafia, or he was teamed up with Eric Young and stuff like that. He wasn't a hard-working man, but the best thing that happened to him during that time was that he let himself go all white, and he had this long white hair and that white goatee, and that's kind of the basis for the sketch that Dan did.
Yeah.
And it kind of felt like he was this elder statesman of professional wrestling that could lend this air of credibility to a company that, was more than happy to give him. I mean, sure, he wasn't making millions, but he was making 6 figures. And eating 6 burgers. So he does eventually find his way back into WWE. Years and years later, it's 2011, he comes back for an appearance at the Royal Rumble. He comes back as Diesel. It's a big feel-good moment. And then fans are kind of sitting and waiting, like kind of thinking, all right, he's going to have a run, right? Because he was wrestling in TNA. He's going to have a run. He didn't want to dye his hair black. But Vince was like, no, fans want to see his Diesel, so dye your hair all jet black.
And your beard.
Like, we saw some of him here now where he's got the boot polish and the fucking, the marker.
Bad. He looks like Steven Seagal.
Oh, show!
He does.
So it's like, all right, they're bringing him back, and you kind of get the sense that maybe it's going to be a bit of a nostalgia act. And they bring him in for this big angle, and I can't tell you, maybe we'll figure out in our upcoming episode, more on that in a little bit. But they inserted him into the CM Punk Summer of Punk angle with the pipe bomb promo, and like this is the biggest thing. We're gonna, it's one of the biggest things in wrestling. I'm sure you've heard people talk about it a lot since Punk has returned to wrestling, and it made out that he was going to wrestle CM Punk, and that was going to be a feud. And they did all these moments where he would come out and be like, little skinny midgets like you should be thanking me for making this business cool, so there's even a place for you to be. And then CM Punk would be like, oh look, it's Kevin Nash, LOL, he's old. Look how dyed his hair is. And then from there they just drop it, and then they make it into this match that we're going to watch now, which is Kevin Nash versus Triple H.
Oh.
In a sledgehammer ladder match.
Right.
Now, this is the last match that we watched. We did a lot of watching for Kev.
Yeah.
I was wondering if the sledgehammer ladder match felt like a fitting rule set for Big Sexy at age, I think he's 47 here. What do you think to the rules for this one?
So there's a sledgehammer hung above from the ceiling.
If only you could see Joe's face right now.
And they have to climb the ladder. Well, they don't have to climb the ladder. They have to win, pinfall or submission. But whoever acquires the hammer first can use it in the match.
Okay, so if you acquire the hammer,
yep,
you can use the hammer. You can also use the ladder as well, it seems.
Yeah, because it's no disqualification, I think. So
I think
you could just use a table or a ladder or a chair or really any weapon you can get your hands on, or interference from a friend.
That's the problem about this match, is that I would have thought from a ring psychology standpoint that Kevin Nash would have opted to not bother with the ladder and just try and beat him without it. There are plenty of shoot interviews where he literally just asked about this match and he rolls his eyes and he's like, they put me in a fucking ladder match. Like, what do you expect?
Yeah, I cannot think of two people I would less like to see in a ladder match than Triple H and Kevin Nash.
So here it is. I thought we could see a little slice of Nash in his older age. What's the story going into? We did have a very dramatic video package. Talk me through what's going through these men's minds. We didn't just have blue and white and orchestral music this time, folks.
No, I don't remember this story, to be honest. I remember that Triple H is the face.
Yeah.
But he he's firing Kevin Nash for some reason.
Yeah, he's meant to be the face, and Cole says when he's introducing the video package, this fight has come about because of misunderstandings between two former best friends.
Yeah.
And it cuts to Triple H in a suit, and it's like, he's the COO, it's like him in a suit looking all like corporate, and he goes, in this business, you can make friends or you can make money. And then it shows him punching Kevin Nash and firing him, and he's the good guy.
Yeah.
I don't know, sometimes you have the corporate guy who's like, I don't have any friends, and beats someone up, and then fires the one guy who was his friend.
Okay, so here's my new rule, I think, about professional wrestling. I've decided this recently.
Okay, please tell me.
If you wear a suit as a man in professional wrestling, you are a heel.
I think that's fair.
I think that should be universal. If you wear a suit, you are a heel now.
Or you could be like an Adam Page sort and wear like a suit and be a good guy, but have like a cowboy shirt and look down at your shoes going, well, I just wore my cowboy boots.
I think you should be allowed to wear a suit on a special occasion.
Yeah.
Obviously.
But coming out generally
speaking. Yeah, like anyone who wears a suit day to day is a heel. I just can't think of someone in a suit as a good guy. Why would you?
Well, maybe Nash knew that Triple H was wearing the suit and he came across as such a heel, and that's why he opted for all like the tap out shirt with a crucifix made out of skulls or whatever it is, to somehow wear clothes that were even more despicable.
Yeah.
So that's what it was. And Triple H says, never mind about my neck. Kevin Nash has broken my heart. So, I kind of like got a big pop in this because in the video package, they showed Kevin Nash beating the shit out of Triple H with a hammer.
Yeah, well,
that was fun.
Not
like,
really, though.
You know what?
No.
They did make him seem like when it reminded me of Diesel throwing all them referees around. When they had Nash, like, kind of pull Triple H out of the ambulance, everyone's like, please, Big Sexy, just stop. And he's like, no, I'm big, you can't stop me. And everyone's like, oh, well, he's just going to do it then.
Do you know what, though? The trouble is, because WWE loves to repeat themselves so much, that just made me think of the Braun Strowman, Roman Reigns stuff.
Yes.
Which was done so much better.
Yeah, right, yeah. Because, I mean, there's a bit of impact and just hoof
there, isn't there? There was a big box that got smashed into.
And you know what? We talked about Just for the Money. Like, and, you know, the guy not taking himself too seriously and all that. Like, the fucking verbiage they have this man doing. And, you know, he's been handed a script and all that here. And he's like, you bring me back and you give me some sort of has-been Legends deal. I want to be in main events. And then Triple H's like, I guess I'm going to have to show him that he's not good enough anymore. And this is Kevin Nash's last singles match in the WWE. And they do kind of air into greatly that the heel of this match is a bitter kind of ex-wrestler, but also a bit shit and nowhere near the level of Triple H, who is amazing.
You know what else I don't understand is that he's referred to as Kevin Nash here despite being dressed as Diesel.
Yeah.
Who I thought was a different character.
Like, okay, he comes back at the Rumble. I remember I popped big time, even though I didn't watch Diesel as a kid, but seeing him in the all black, because I was used to him, being all grey and a silver fox in TNA, grand or whatever, that's fine. But if he is going to be Kevin Nash, why is he still doing the Just for Men thing, And this is the thing I was telling you about that is so perplexing. He asked if he could go white, and Vince said no, because fans will only recognise you with the dark hair. And you go, okay, fine then. And then they had CM Punk make fun of him and say, Just for Men, look at him with his stupid fucking black hair. And he goes, okay, Vince, I know someone we could actually get a sponsorship with Just for Men. A little bit of business.
Amazing.
No, that will make us seem old and out of touch.
No, it makes Vince feel old and out of touch because Vince dyes his hair.
Do you think that the 55-year-old general age demographic of people who watch Monday Night Raw might be a little bit interested in Just for Men?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think so.
I mean, you don't need to go full catheter on them, but like, you can dangle some of the stuff that's age appropriate, like.
See, what would have been a better counter argument is that it would actually make Just for Men look bad because the dye job on Kevin Nash is so appalling. That Just for Men would be like, nah.
I'm just saying, right? And this is from one Kevin to another, okay? I have in the past just erroneously claimed that he's in the ranch despite not asking him. I'm just assuming. But I will say right now, we've been through lockdowns and pandemics and all that, this, that, and the other. I'm confident, if you want to do a run as Diesel, Big Sexy, I'm confident I could do a better dye job than whoever did that.
Yeah.
I can do it. I know I can.
You've bleached hair before.
I've bleached Joe's hair. I've coloured it. We've layered. I'm pretty much good to go.
Yeah.
Look at that fucking one. He dipped his head in a bucket of paint, Joe. It was ridiculous.
It's shocking.
Unbelievable. This was the point in the match where we then had to switch from using the WWE Network, award-winning,
we pay for
$9.99 a month, and I went onto this new platform, which I feel like was a lot more agreeable and actually would let me watch this match because they kept freezing and glitching and kicking me off the app. So I had to go into this new thing called YouTube and watch this for free instead, which I can only assume that if I was going to recommend you watch this match, this is the way you should do it.
But on YouTube, WWE have edited this match so that every time anyone gets remotely hit by the sledgehammer, or even like not the sledgehammer, like
the ladder,
any weapon,
yeah, anything to the head,
they cut it so that it feels like you've dropped frames, so you don't actually see the impact.
Do you want to know something fun?
What?
Every time I watched SmackDown as a kid growing up, they would do that for every single weapon shot. Every time that happened. Or they would cut to the crowd, someone going, "Way!" and they cut back then.
So annoying.
Like, the idea that, like, if you cut away, we at home wouldn't hit each other with folding chairs.
Yeah.
We still did.
They get around that now by just zooming in really close on a wrestler's face when any move happens, so that you can't see the move and therefore you can't copy it at home.
There was a moment really like right at the start of the match where they locked up and Triple H kind of shoved Nash back a little bit, and Nash's feet literally went like roller skates.
Oh god.
Like it literally looked like it was a newborn giraffe or something like that. And I thought, oh fuck, he's gonna slip, he's gonna fucking fall and hurt himself here. Which was that was the main kind of investment I had in this match. Was I was genuinely worried for Kevin Nash at this point, where he was at and all that. The two guys kind of slowly plod about. One guy's legs don't work. The other guy is so packed on, full of muscle, the joints of his body don't really work.
They're literally like doing nothing, and they both seem so tired. And meanwhile, on commentary, they're like an explosion of emotion here. Yeah, nothing's happening.
They keep saying, like, anytime Triple H does anything, it's like onto his best friend. Oh, his best friend breaking his legs with knees and ladders. And again, like Nash isn't in control in this one, but he's the heel. But I don't think he could be in control in this one because you don't think he has enough.
Yeah.
In him almost. So Triple H is just slowly kind of going around, and I've never watched a match where I felt bad for someone in both real life and in kayfabe at the exact same time.
Yeah.
But I was here. This is the duality of Kevin Nash wrestling in 2011, I think this was.
Around halfway through the match, Nash's hair starts to get very frizzy.
Oh,
and he begins to look like Mickey Rourke.
Oh, it's bad. Like the dye, I think it's because of the dye. You can see it. I'm not saying he has a bald spot, but the hair that he has is now so dark. Like, light cannot penetrate. It's like he's got ray tracing on his dye job or something like that. Or like an OLED screen instead of a fucking scalp. Because you can really see every bit lit up, like, absolutely perfectly. And it made me feel even worse. And then Triple H put him in a figure four leg lock in a ladder, which made me genuinely go, it made me scream. I didn't think it would happen.
Yeah.
It was like 12 years after the last figure four I saw him put in. I wasn't ready for it, Joe. But as this is happening, Michael Cole goes, Kevin Nash may be hurting now, King, but Triple H was very hurt by Kevin Nash and his actions.
Yeah, his heart was hurt, so...
Oh my god. The fucking silence.
Yeah, the crowd are absolutely dead.
So dead.
It's really, really awkward. Like a genuinely awkward atmosphere.
Yeah, because it's like... There's an awkward silence in the Nash-Goldberg match, but that's because people are expecting something to happen. But here, it's like everyone's come to a conclusion that nothing can happen.
Yeah.
So they just kind of sat there a little bit. When Nash, he's going to go for like a powerbomb to Triple H to the announce table, and it's like Triple H is like, yo, and does like the backdrop, and they just do a kind of...
He just rolls onto the table.
Do a little roly-poly.
I think you were meant to go through that table. Also, that's impressive given that Nash is a big fucking guy.
You're asking
Triple H
too
is
much
strong.
Here, yeah.
Like, it's one thing when Sasha Banks can't go through the announce table. She, like, weighs like a bag of flour.
Yeah, grand.
Kevin Nash is nearly 7 foot tall. You'd think he could just sit on the thing and it would collapse.
That shows you how gingerly he's landing here at the moment. So, there's a point where Nash is on the offense. He throws Triple H into the ring, and the fans get really excited because they think that the match is going to end now. But then Nash gets out of sorts and then leaves the ring, and then he comes back in. I just realized then at this point that they've given him a script for the match as well. I think a producer said, you do this, 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 and this, and he was out of position. So, yeah, they bring the ladder back into play.
Nash looks like he's sleepwalking. Like, he's just slowly wandering around.
The way he grabs items and stuff, yeah.
Like with his eyes half open.
He's waking up and he's got a table.
Yeah, and it's like,
what am I doing
don't
this
wake
for?
him up. Don't wait. It's really dangerous to wake someone up when they're sleepwalking. Don't wake him up. Kevin, put that ladder down.
Is that why when the
Kevin.
crowd is so quiet?
Yeah, because they don't want to wake him up. They're like, come on,
see-
back to bed. No, put the ladder down. No.
The best part of this match was when Nash popped the straps down. I was like, big man, look at them fucking pecs.
Kevin, no,
look at them
put
shoulders.
Your clothes back on. Come on, but back to bed, Kevin.
As Steve Austin would say, God damn, he's the human torso. Look at that thing. He kept it. It's an upper body business, as Rick Rude said. He looked fucking immaculate. Spot of the night. Both men very, very slowly climb a ladder, and Kevin Nash goes through a table off the top of the ladder, but only after Triple H grabs the end of the hammer as it's on the kind of housing.
Like swings it.
And he swings it. He makes it swing by his head and he bops him and he falls. And I was just a bit confused, Joe. Did that count as retrieving it? Because you're the sledgehammer expert on this show now, we've realised. Joe,
Am I?
Yeah, don't you? You went on this diatribe. I think.
I had to correctly use the sledgehammer.
On pay-per-view Classic, you went in depth about the means and methods that one should use a sledgehammer.
Well, that certainly isn't a correct use of a sledgehammer. Is when it's suspended from a ceiling.
Yeah,
like
take it
that.
out of its housing first, right?
Yeah.
I think Triple H should have been disqualified because he didn't actually retrieve the hammer. Is what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
So he falls off the ladder through a table. And then he has the look of a man who's just been woken from a sleepwalk. Like, he's really shook.
I told you it was dangerous. You shouldn't do it.
He does the Wolfpack sign, which was like the sign of, the click. And, Too Sweet, which was the catchphrase, from the Wolfpack in WCW. And it's to hold up and show his camaraderie. The actual origin of the Wolfpack sign is that it's meant to look like a little wolf. And according to Bret Hart, anyway, when they were on a tour of Europe and the Middle East, they would stop by Turkey, and apparently some gangster guy that they met there one of the nights in one of the clubs, he kept doing that symbol, and he's like, it's what the Turkish mafia do.
Oh shit!
It's meant to be like a lone wolf, because if you look at it, it looks a little bit like a wolf,
right?
And they're like, that's the fucking. Like,
oh my god!
Brett says that's the cool. Brett in his version, it's like I told them, and in their version, it's like we saw that and we thought it was the coolest thing.
Course.
But like the idea, like he's there, he's holding it up, and Triple H gives him the suck it, and Cole says, "Yeah." Triple H says, "To hell with the click," and Triple H wins. And he this is of course after as well the crowd chant one more time, and because Kevin can't be given another pedigree, he hits with the hammer again instead, which was one of the most miserable, long drawn out. I shouldn't feel bad for the baddie this much. And the Triple H.
Feel bad for me.
Oh, you feel bad for
watch
you.
This
you have to
match.
watch it, Joe. How'd you get on? Was it better or worse than the Goldberg Nash encounter?
It was worse.
It was worse?
Much worse.
Where would you rank this in ladder matches and matches you have generally seen?
I don't know. One of the worst. Definitely down there.
Yeah?
Maybe even worse than Vince versus Shane.
Well, hey, no, okay, fine. You have your controversial opinions and all that.
Well, you think this is better than Vince versus Shane?
No, Shane versus Vince is one of the best fucking matches, god damn it.
Okay.
So, what star rating did you get for this then?
No stars.
No
This
stars.
is such a crap match. Why is every Triple H match like this? Every single Triple H match I've ever seen has been exactly like this match.
What do you mean like this? What are the
Shit.
tropes? Shit.
Bad, boring, not good, disappointing. Try to think of other synonyms.
Moribund. Yes, moribund.
I'm quite moribund.
You're quite moribund after that.
Right, yeah. I'm ornery.
Oh, honey. But look, he ended it at least, in his mind, I guess it was a high, because if you're going to have one last match, this was very much, I think he went through the motions here. He got the payday. I think it was at this point, it's like, right, no more big matches. I think he showed up for like one spot at a Royal Rumble. He did a few bits here and there since, showing up and all that. But where Nash really kind of got his longevity, and it was happening long before this. It was on those shoot interviews. It was on the marketability. He knew better than anyone. I think anyone has ever known this and not had someone like figure it out for them about it. Like, I could just go sit down 2 hours, 3 hours, have a glass of wine, talk shit.
Eat some ravioli.
Like, we watched a few of them, and the energy level is fucking all over the place. There's times where he's genuinely pissed off, and he's like, I'm here to settle some scores.
Yes, yeah.
The one where it's him and X-Pac talking about, like, fucking Wade Barrett's wife, because they're fucking outlaws,
like he literally just agreed to do that to hang out with X-Pac, like he hadn't seen his friend for a while, and he realised this would be a good chance to catch up and shoot the shit.
One of the earliest things I showed Joe, of course, was him eating the ravioli.
Yes, which someone else, by the way, sent me a supercut of him eating the ravioli, and it is so funny.
Oh, it's just the food bits.
It's just the food
like
bits.
Palming the olives, etc.
Palming the olives, yeah. And so then, like, you only hear, like, him say a couple of bits, and it's like...
It's the suck of air that comes...
suck of air, him talking about hot women, and him saying that, in his opinion, like, the only wrestling show that should be on television is the Kelly show, and it should be Kelly in slow motion. It's literally just him drinking wine, eating ravioli, and talking about babes.
Someone sent me a clip. It was actually Brody, rest in peace. It was him talking about the one time he met Kevin Nash, and it was literally just like, you know, him talking about what they were going to do in the match, and, you know, he was like, kind of, do you want to do a jackknife? And he's like, I don't think we'll be doing that. That's all right. We'll do a hot tag, but we don't need to do that. And the guy kind of like, do you want to come back for the show tomorrow? Nah, I think we're all right. And he's literally like, you know, as the show was ending, you know, there was an escort there to meet him, and he was off to, like, you know, a nice restaurant across the road and all that. Like, and Brody was basically just like, kind of, that man knows how to live. Like, you know, he has figured out this life on the road, whatever it may be. You know, he settled into a nice groove in his later years. And I think that match was probably... He remembers that match with Triple H as much as probably the random-ass match where he had a fucking big bowl of ravioli and agreed to do a shoot interview before his bus came, or whatever it was. You know, he figured out a ride that suited his means. And he probably had a career that was legitimately twice as long as he probably intended it to be as a result. I don't think he intended on being... you know, in a grey hair wrestling TNA, you know, in 2010 and stuff like that, but he was. Triple H said at the end of their documentary that the Big Daddy Cool, I don't really care, that kind of aloof persona, it's all put on, and that inside there is someone who cares deeply about his friends, his peers, and the wrestling business, and ultimately the WWE, wanting what's best for them, and he respects Vince greatly, and... it's all kind of a front, the cool guy persona. The real Kevin Nash, we don't actually know. The real Kevin Nash actually cares quite a lot. Nice words from a friend to end off a shit documentary? Or do you think there is something to that this is kind of like almost like an armor that Kevin Nash wears?
I do think it's put on to an extent. I think it's exaggerated in the way that any successful wrestler exaggerates their own personality to get across. Yeah. So I think genuinely he is a very cool guy. I don't think you can just imagine up coolness like that. That's either something you have or you don't have.
And like, to kind of tease that apart a little bit more, because I do remember you said, like, when we did the Ultimate Warrior episode, that you were like, you know, the look or the gimmick or whatever, it's like, it's exciting and all that, but it wasn't for you and you didn't want to see him or the matches or anything like that. I think we've established that Kevin Nash matches aren't necessarily your favorite brand, but like, did he entertain you as a performer? You say cool, would that mean you'd want to watch Kevin Nash interviews or promos or stuff like that? I
definitely would be down for seeing like promos, anything where he gets to be a horrid, nasty heel with his friends. I'm interested in seeing.
I'd love him as an authority figure.
I have no interest at all in seeing any of his matches ever again. No, thank you.
Is he like the lowest down in terms of like match quality and stuff like that?
Yeah, he's lower even than Hulk Hogan.
Really? Yeah. Fuck me!
Because at least with Hulk Hogan, the fans love him.
Right, you've seen a lot of... I mean, I feel it's fair because we've watched a lot of like him in like the best possible scenarios. We watched him with Shawn, we watched him with Brett fucking twice.
Yeah.
We watched him as champion at big events.
He's not...
We watched him in a special match he booked for himself. Like, come on.
I don't know. He's either not a good wrestler or not for me. But either way, I don't like his wrestling.
I would leave it kind of open because, in the sense that, like, I think you've kind of come to the point where, like, you can have what I have, which is like a long time of like viewing him one way and then being kind of gently surprised. I think you've got a very holistic top-down look at Nash, and I don't think you'll ever want to see those matches. But hey, if you at home think, like, hey, we completely missed the mark here, and there's some really great, big, sexy Kevin Nash matches, keeping in mind what we've seen on Pay-Per-View Classic, I would, love to hear it, It would be interesting to see if we could win Joe over, but it feels like does he make up for it with the other stuff? Like, does he even need to be a good wrestler?
No. Well, so I believe that in a balanced wrestling show, there is space for someone like him.
Okay.
Like, you don't have to it doesn't have to just be everyone trying hard all the time and being really good at actual athletic wrestling, because you don't necessarily want to see that all the time. It doesn't make for a very balanced show.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about Kevin Nash is his little comedy segments, and stuff like that, and he's very, very good at that.
Oh yeah, I mean he knows how to weave a nice little story, and that extends, I think, to his Twitter game and stuff like that recently.
Yeah.
Like, again, finger on the pulse. I was kind of saying to you, I feel like he's not in a bad way, but he's kind of a bit of a shapeshifter, and that he kind of realizes, he knows what the world is like. I think he's very observant, and I think he kind of, I don't say he's playing a part or all that, but we found an interview clip of him talking about the Hogan N-word incident from 5 or 6 years ago. Nash's thoughts from 5 or 6 years ago, and compare that to what he would probably say about it now.
I hope.
I mean, Kevin Nash was admitted to using the N-word himself, in day-to-day life, all the time in the interview that we watched with him.
He said, therefore, it's fine that Hogan used it to refer to a black man.
Yeah, and I feel like I've maybe fallen into the spell a little bit sometimes of being no more than the rest of them, where my expectations are so low, and Big Daddy Cool comes out with a vaguely political tweet that I agree with. I'm like, yeah, good on you, Kevin Nash. Fucking yeah.
It's funny you say that, because he has a reputation of being
Big Daddy Woke.
Yeah, which I don't think is fair.
I mean, you thought that, I think, when we started it, but I think once we got to shoot interview, once we started looking at which wrestlers are dicks and hoe bags and stuff like that, that went by the wayside.
And not just that, but I went on his Twitter and I had a look at the sort of things that he talks about and his politics and stuff. He's a centrist Democrat. He supports Biden.
I mean, if you hate,
he's not woke.
Yeah.
To me, I hate the term woke anyway, but for that definition in my mind means you are a leftist. A Democrat maybe, but a leftist Democrat absolutely.
Yeah.
And to be a Democrat but a centrist Democrat, that's that to me doesn't align with the values of woke, inverted commas.
But I guess when the other guy was in the White House, who we also did an episode on, probably that seemed a lot more, radical seeming by comparison. I think
that's it, because he was one of the few wrestlers that actually spoke out against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of wrestlers either just shut up or were pro-Trump.
my efforts to not mention his name went completely...
I'm sorry, I'm going to mention his name. I don't want to skirt around it. But yeah, I back onto the subject of whether or not he's putting on this whole cool thing.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I would say about that is, I think when it comes to the backstage politics, I do think there's an element of that he puts on, because I think he realizes that in the industry of professional wrestling, there's a few different ways you can handle stress or conflict in wrestling.
Yeah.
And there's Bret Hart's attitude of sulking, which it doesn't go down very well with the other boys. Or there's the type of aggressive attitude of right, I'll pick a fight with you then and I'll beat you up.
Yeah.
And I think Kevin Nash's attitude was more if I just pretend it doesn't bother me and I pretend I'm above it. It's kind of it's a similar attitude you might get told if you're being bullied at school, or if you want to just get on with kids who are not very nice. You just you kind of go along with it, but you don't. And it's the trouble is it's quite cowardly to do that, I think, because it means that you let bad behavior go unchecked.
Yeah.
Which is why then you have people like Shawn Michaels
I
being
guess
a fucking prick.
His argument is going to be kind of, what role is it of mine?
Exactly.
And I think there's two things about that always kind of draw my attention, which is, number one, when Scott Hall was going through all of his problems, I always thought it was quite unfair that people were turning to Kevin Nash going, well...
What are you going to do about it then, as his father?
And he's like, well, what do you want me to do? I've bought a black suit because I think he might die soon.
Yeah.
But, it's sad. But he's a grown-ass adult. It's not my responsibility.
Yeah.
But the other thing as well is that, people might not realise this the way you've been talking about him. Marriage of over 30 years, Kevin Nash.
That, to me, was the biggest swerve.
Your jaw hit the floor,
this whole episode, because the whole time we were doing all this research, I was thinking, he probably has a wife somewhere, but I can't imagine they're super happy or they've been together very long. I kind of thought he'd be a bit like Rob Van Dam, and maybe like he had a long-suffering wife and then he got with someone younger in his later years. But no, he's been with the same woman for longer than he's been a professional wrestler.
But that's the thing about Nash, is that Nash is like, he's actually, for someone who's quite a shapeshifter, I don't want to use the word kind of in terms of a sense of admiration, but like principled, in the sense that it's obvious that he has these rules and stuff for himself. And, you know, that extended to, there were certain drugs and certain things that he wouldn't do in wrestling and while he was partying and all of that.
Man's got to have his code.
He had this Nash code. And, you know, the little I've heard him talk about his wife, other than they seem very, very happy together and all that, was that it was like either Hall or Sean or someone like that in the clique was like, hey, why don't we, get the wives together this weekend? And he was like, you want our wives to get together and talk about us and what we do when we're away. Do you all want that?
That says a lot to me. That's like, in terms of both how cunning he is and also how fucking shady.
Well, I mean, in fairness, you know, if Scott Hall's wife sat down and chatted with Shawn Michaels' wife in 1996 and they started telling tales or whatever, yeah, probably it was going to end in tears for someone.
Do you know what else I think?
But the thing is, it worked though. He's still fucking married, right?
Do you know what else I think, though?
What?
I think Vince told him that. I think Vince said, keep the wives away from each other. It would then damage the clique, which then encourage the efforts to, like, unionize at the WWF. Seriously, if they had communicated...
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true.
Much more likely that would have happened if they had met up.
Kevin Nash, to this day, the only person I know who was invited to Vince McMahon's house for a meeting about becoming world champion, fell asleep on the couch and still left that meeting becoming world heavyweight champion. Why don't we have a look at your tweets about big sexy Kevin Nash, Diesel?
First up from Tristan M. Carroll.
Hey, Tristan.
Over on Twitter at HowToWrestling. Kevin Nash might be the coolest man alive, maybe. He's Orange Cassidy's gimmick, but in real life. A cool guy trying exactly as hard as he needs to, and never any harder.
Do you think that Nash saw Orange throwing them lo-fi kicks and thinking, God damn it, man?
I do think...
I should have done that.
I do think Orange Cassidy would have looked at Kevin Nash and gone, right, there's a place for someone who is handsome and does very little.
Yeah.
We don't want someone doing all the moves all the time. Sometimes people just want to bring it down and just take it slow. And there is a place for that.
Big match Tony Khan if you're going to bring in Kevin Nash for a shot.
He'd be great, and what they should do is literally give him a role in like those like segments, those like backstage bits, the promotional
paparazzi
stuff.
productions
again. Exactly.
Yeah.
Make the A-level media stuff feel like an actual fucking funny sketch show.
Hot question for you. Would you want Kevin Nash in your training school teaching wrestlers?
What company am I working for?
It could be anywhere. Say we're a big ticket company. Like we've got training capacity. Let's just say not coming in for a seminar. I'm saying like. Is
this the How To Wrestling training school?
Where we've seemed to have hired quite a litany of great talkers and Tajiri's there as well, I'm pretty sure, and all that. But like, is what he has to offer younger talent so pivotal that we should do it? Or is the poisonous side of us that we've skirted around, that wrestling has moved past, is that such a danger that maybe actually people don't need to hear from self-centered, lazy Kevin Nash? Or should they hear from evocative, intelligent, genre-pushing, smart man, get the pay that you earn, type of man? Like, I don't know.
I think he owes it to the next generation of wrestlers, considering he pulled the ladder up so much from behind him. I think he owes it to the industry to give back something in terms of character development, not wrestling. No wrestling. He should stay well away from wrestling training because he's not very good.
He could tell. What? Didn't you remember that match we watched where all the new blood came out and he just kicked them and the referee just started counting 1, 2, 3, even though he didn't pin them, and they were like, count that man out. He's so good at wrestling. He's almost too good, I'd say.
But definitely like the character work, the comedy timing, because so many wrestlers, especially now, think they're the funniest fucking thing because they've watched like an episode of Tim and Eric or something. Like, and they suddenly think they're like hilarious, or like because they have banter with their friends, and like he is genuinely funny without trying.
Yeah,
he has that skill of like dialing it back, which is like that's so hard, and I think so many people ruin comedy by trying too hard. Absolutely. And it just makes it cringy. He doesn't have that, so I think that, And also contract negotiations and just like talking with your fellow wrestler to understand and negotiate better pay for everyone. I think that it needs to be...
It's almost like dark arts of wrestling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, to an extent, some of it. Or at least it would be considered by WWE. They wouldn't have him teaching in the Performance Center how to fucking negotiate your contract. Oh, actually, we think it'd be good if you, Braun Breaker, did your own contract. It's good experience for you. I said the same thing to your father, but he wouldn't listen.
Right, next up from Refsaz Wizards. I don't know much about the man, but I'm sure his career has its share of highs and Merlots.
Way!
Whatever you think of him, his longevity has proven all the Cabernet sayers wrong.
Fucking brilliant. Let me tell you, that was the only episode of Broken Skull Sessions Joe and I have ever watched that had multiple red wine breaks and brow moppings. Could have been related, who knows?
Next up from Tyler TMC. Very integral to how contracts are done in the modern world. He knew his value and always worked smarter, not harder. The best shoot interviewer of all time. Doesn't take him seriously, which is a rarity in wrestling. Everyone should learn from him.
You know what? I think one thing that's definitely come from this, and I think he can join a very, very short group. I feel like there's certain wrestlers who promos will be popped on YouTube when we're at a loose end, but he's going to join that hallowed hall, which also includes, I think, only maybe Bret Hart, of type in wrestler's name and then literally any event in wrestling and you'll get an interview and you'll get an opinion.
Well, you'll probably get a lie.
Yeah, what, like the Montreal Screwjob was a work, brother?
Well, like there's a video we watched where it was like that. I can't remember what this channel's called, but it's like it's a famous one on YouTube, and you see all these wrestlers doing like, is so and so a dick?
Yes, that's kayfabe commentary.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And he was asked about like God knows how many people, and he was like, "Yeah, I love Vince McMahon. Cool. He's a cool bro. Yeah, I love Triple H.
He's not a Legends deal.
Cool bro. Yeah, I love Hulk Hogan. He's the nicest guy.
You don't trust anyone who says that they get on with everyone. Basically, is what
well, he said he got on with everyone except for Dusty Rhodes because he made him into the Oz gimmick, and that's what I don't trust. It's fine if you get on with everyone because some people do, but if you get on with everyone except for one person who made you kind of into a slight of joke for like less than a year.
Yeah, in fairness, like I had a lot of like subconscious eye rolls when we went through that list as well, because it's like I know you don't like that person.
Just like have some fucking. I understand as well, like not telling the truth about what your opinions are on Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon because they're very powerful still in the industry, and he's a politician. He's gonna go out for himself. Yeah. That's fine, but like at least be more clever about it.
So you were expecting him to be a little bit more savvy and outspoken.
Yeah, like if you're going to say, oh, I really like Vince McMahon or I really like Hulk Hogan, you go, of course they're not without their share of controversy and, they've got all these problems. But, in my experience, I really like them because of this. But he didn't say that. He was like, yeah, he's the best guy. Cool. Vince McMahon is such a cool bro. He's the coolest. He's so chill. Everyone loves him. Shut up. You are just lying now.
Oh my God, this is so fun. It's so interesting. I was like, at the start, even at the point at the start of the episode, I was convinced you'd fall in love with this guy.
I know. But no, I don't trust him.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah.
He reminds me of myself at my worst. Like I feel like he's what I used to be like when I was like in school and stuff.
Right, I see, yeah.
Just like saying what people want to hear because he knows that it'll get him over and that people will think he's cool, and that if he pretends he's like unaffected by stuff, and he who cares less is the coolest guy. And
yeah, but you were on top of that territory for 3 years, Joe. Come on.
I've been there. And you know what? The thing is, I think it's a coward's game because it's easy. And that's why I admire people like Bret Hart, because that's the hard shit. Yeah. Is to be cool even when you're being honest with yourself and everyone else. That's admirable. Next tweet from Will is also young. Like the fine wine he enjoys, Kevin Nash gets better with age. Bemoaned in his time for doing seemingly little, I see him now as a master at getting the most out of doing the least. He's funny, handsome, cool, and his entrance themes are amazing. I love Big Sexy!
Yeah, well, he's definitely he's like a black coffee of a wrestler. He's acquired taste. You'll appreciate him when you're older, guys, okay?
Now from Not John Brown. I once saw a tweet that read something to the effect of, Kevin Nash realised that if he worked 80% harder, he may have been paid 8% more. And I think that beautifully encompasses his whole career.
You know what? I don't think I've seen a single bit of footage or hear him talk about watching or liking wrestling before he got into it. And I think that's a big difference, isn't it? Like all the wrestlers, particularly like Brett and Razor and all that we mentioned at the start, those who are the big fans will always give themselves a lot more or hold themselves to a higher standard or like kind of work more or be convinced to work more a lot readily than those who are coming from that outsider perspective.
Yeah, for sure. Finally now from S. Jarcade. I would say Kevin Nash gets lucky in the eyes of history because everyone sees Hulk Hogan as the worst and most selfish guy. Kevin Nash never helped a single human in the business and actively hurt at least 3 companies in his selfishness. And he's a worse wrestler than Hulk.
I mean, yeah, you've got a point there.
I'm really glad because it was quite hard to find. There were only a few people who said, no, I'm not a fan of Kevin Nash, actually. Most people do really, even though they will admit he's not a great wrestler, most people do love him.
But like, I'm kind of like, he's I think wrestlers, and it's certainly, when we look back in previous episodes of this show, wrestlers definitely have their ebbs and flows in terms of their popularity. And when you're kind of someone who's still on Twitter and public facing.
Oh yeah, he's so cool even today. Like the fact that he's in like John Wick and Magic Mike, and he's on Twitter talking about like these quite controversial things, and he's like got these quips and stuff.
And you know what? Him getting his knee sorted and being a spokesperson for like that therapy, the stem cell therapy really that he used and all that. I am very happy for him. But I think a lot of that is like, I'll admit, I have been very slowly charmed by Kevin Nash over the years. And I'd say the one thing that's very difficult for me as a wrestling fan of so many years is that if there's someone who I've slowly come around to, it's not like, I won't hear a bad word against them, but I'll always kind of view it as in like, yeah, I see that because I used to think that, but I kind of don't think that anymore. But I absolutely do see why you say that. I mean, I'd go as far as to say I agree with almost everything you said in that tweet there.
Yeah. I mean, that is pretty much what I said.
Yeah. Interesting. Is he like the most controversial person we've had in that sense?
No way. I mean, he's fine.
But he's unique. I think he stands out as a politician in his own right. I think
because he's just aged so well. He's very clever in that he's got his finger on the zeitgeist or whatever you'd say. Like, he understands what's kind of
There's not that many funny wrestlers.
There's not, and there's not that many cool wrestlers.
I was saying old guys from that old generation who are funny.
Yeah.
Like Shawn and Triple H, if they try and make me laugh, Jesus Christ, it's like fucking great in my teeth. Like.
That's the thing. Whereas like, it's really cringy, I guess, for most wrestlers to say stuff on Twitter. But like, Kevin Nash is one of the few people who actually does come out with these cool lines. Like, there were a couple of instances of people being like, oh, you should stop talking about politics. Like, you've clearly got like CTE.
He's called people soy boys and stuff like that.
He was like, I wake up with a massive hog hard on every morning, and I crank it out. It shows I'm still young.
And I go to bed every night with that.
Like, that's his go-to insult. Is like, I've got a big rock hard dick.
Well, I mean,
I'm really young for my age because of this dick.
Well, that's probably better than, why don't I go around your house and I'll fucking dog fuck your wife.
Exactly.
Oh, the first time she ever came, man.
I do hope he's growing. I hope this isn't just a case of him, like, putting on a different, like,
this is the
disguise.
Yeah, Nash 10.0 or whatever.
Yeah, I hope it is a case that, like, throughout time he has evolved and changed and grown. Like that instance with the Montreal Screwjob where he said it was a joke.
And then, like, you found him tweeting about it going, like, I was just joking.
He called up Brett afterwards because Brett found out about it and didn't. He was interviewed on it for, like, Inside the Ropes or something, and he called Kevin Nash out and was like, yeah, you're a piece of shit, Kevin Nash. And Kevin Nash immediately called him and was like, bro, it was a joke. I'm really sorry. It's like, okay, it wasn't though, was it? Or if it was, it wasn't very clearly a joke. Like, no one thought it was a joke.
I think the one thing I would really like to see from Kevin Nash is someone do like a Kevin Nash reacts to style video where you have to sit him down and watch all them shoot interviews that he did. And I want to see if he cringes or if he goes, oh, fucking boy.
I think he'd just laugh at them. Be like, it's just a joke.
Yeah,
it's just a joke.
I would just love to know what his thoughts are on this. It's very, very interesting. I'm so happy that we finally got to talk about big, sexy Kevin Nash. Someone who very much was I don't know how to say eyes bigger than your stomach, but you were so excited to do him and to do this episode about him and learn about him. And I think this is one of the cases of the more you learned about him, the more complicated the feelings became about him.
I am worried I've come out of this episode seeming like I don't like Kevin Nash, and that's not true. I really, really do like him as a performer. I admire a lot about him. He's clearly very intelligent. Like, the psychology of wrestling is something he really has thought about and understands, and he has given a lot to this business. It's just, I don't trust him as a person. If I knew him in real life, I would never tell him any of my secrets. I would never give him any position of power over me. I just would not. I don't trust him.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. God.
I don't know, like game recognized game.
Well, our next episode is one that is very much anticipated, possibly one of the most anticipated episodes of all time. And there was always a small part of me inside that was like, we can't do this episode until, You know we can't do it until... Our next episode is How to CM Punk, who has returned to the world of wrestling, or the world of wrestling has returned to him, however he wants to put it. We're going to learn about someone who has been, honestly, the butt of a few jokes in this podcast in its early days.
I'm going to finally learn about the poo in the ring.
You're going to learn all about the pipe bomb. You're going to learn about the summer of Punk in Ring of Honor and in WWE. We're going to learn about the rise and the fall and one of the most kind of... honestly, mind-blowing fallings out a wrestler's had with a company in modern times, his return to wrestling, and everything that came in between. It's going to be a very interesting story because it's going to weave in a lot of the narratives from other episodes kind of in together. We're going to be touching on some of those kind of rough and ready indie days that we talked about with like Samoa Joe and Colt Cabana and Bryan Danielson. But then we're going to be getting into the likes of the ECW relaunch. We're going to be talking about getting onto the main roster, working with big stars like Jericho and The Rock, and how it can kind of almost encapsulate how frustrating the WWE experience can be if you are a very passionate performer. He's honestly someone who I kind of have worried about doing an episode at the point because I've given off vibes about him in the last few years, and I had a lot of very strong opinions about this man. I don't know where I'm at yet entirely at the moment. I'm certainly very happy that he's back, and I'm really excited to talk to you. I think I will need to re-listen to some old episodes and just kind of feel like, what was it? What was my thought process back then? Where am I at?
Yeah.
Because I don't want this to be an episode where it's just, he's come back and we're all happy, and that's the only point of it. I think there are so many lessons and so many bits of history that we'll find out by examining the career and the life and basically the person that is CM Punk. Phil Brooks, it's going to be our next episode. Are you excited?
Kind of. I'm actually more nervous, I think, than anything else.
I know there's people who are basically, no matter what we say, are going to be like, fuck this, and throw whatever they're listening to the podcast out the window.
Yeah, I am a bit worried. I probably
a
will
lightning
say,
bolt type of a wrestler.
Like just if you don't like any criticism towards him, and I know some people are like that, and that's absolutely fine.
Oh, they'll be, but like we criticize everyone.
I know, but I know that CM Punk
not
fans,
enough.
They've had it tough.
Oh, yeah.
And also, some of them are especially sensitive about it because of what's happened with his career. Yeah. That's not to say I won't like him. I probably will, but...
I'm trying to approach this as, like if you're someone who's listened to previous podcasts that I've done, and I've made, drop jokes about him.
We are going to make fun of him.
But, if you've been mad offended by that or anything like that, I am sorry. I genuinely am sorry if I've offended any fan by comments or jokes or japes that I've made. I do want to go in depth on this.
And also,
if you're a true believer, I want to hear from you,
And there are lots of people out there who fucking hate his guts for various reasons.
And I should say, he's a wrestler who I'm going to endeavor to show you the appeal of, but I've said it before and I'll say it again. He was never my guy. He was never my hero. He was never my favorite wrestler, And I understand if you're listening at home, he might have been that. I know he's a very important role model and he's a very important figure for a lot of people. And that's why I'm extending the olive branch and asking if you're someone who has felt that way about CM Punk and he is a very special performer for you for stuff that's happened in or out of the ring. Please let us know your thoughts, your feelings, emotions, stories about CM Punk, important moments we need to see, important matchups, and important promos, because this is another master of the mic that we'll be dealing with. Use the hashtag #HowToCMPunk. I cannot wait to see the artwork that Dan does for this one. I am so excited. But hey, everyone who contributed to the as complex an episode as it is about the man himself, thank you everyone who's joined in the conversation for How To Kevin Nash. Make sure you check out howtowrestling.com for any all updates about episodes coming up. All the match listings and additional bonus viewing is up there as always for you to check out. Joe, next time's gonna be a big one. We're gonna drop a pipe bomb, not the one that you're thinking about, the actual one instead, which you'll finally get to learn about. Until next time, it's going to be a goodbye from me, Kevin.
And a goodbye from me, Joe.
And we'll see you next time on How To Wrestling.
See ya.